that was approved on December 10th, 2018. Chick, you want to give us an overview of this, please?
Sure. This was as you said, a permit that was issued in 2018. It did have a buffer restoration planting plan. I've been in touch with the applicant. Apparently there was issues with the tussock sedge, that it was not really proper for the environmental conditions on the site. So they're requesting a renewal, but also a modification to the buffer planting plan. They suggested native species that are on an updated ARIS design plan dated December 8th, 2021. I've reviewed that, had a conversation with Mr. Bowman, who's with us tonight, and have no objection to either the renewal or the buffer planting plan. And because our correspondence just occurred today, I sent a memo this afternoon providing that. I'm also suggesting that in addition to reflecting the revised ARIS plan, that we add a condition 9 to the original permit. It ended at 8 conditions previously, and this would add the standard vegetation survival parameters that we've incorporated into other permits. So that's all in a memo to you. And I did want to hear from Fred to see if we need to amend the actual physical permit, or if that memo would be sufficient for the records in the building department for the purpose of this modification and renewal.
I think if we just do a motion to extend, conditioned upon meeting the requirements of your memo dated, whatever the date is on it, that would be sufficient.
It is today's date.
Today's date. So a motion to extend the permit, are we doing it for 1 more year or 2 more years, or?
I have it as 2, well, the original permit was 2 years, so that can be decided. I didn't specify.
Yeah, I think we usually do a 2-year extension. So extending for 2 years, but further conditioned on meeting the requirements of Chick's memo.
May I get a motion to that effect, please?
I'll make that motion.
And a second, please?
I second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Knowledge
Have a
again.
nice evening.
Yeah, Will Bowman was here, and that was pretty easy, huh, Will?
Yeah, man.
Very good. If only they would all go so smoothly.
Good. Good
That's
speaking
good.
with you today, Will, and we'll be in touch.
Right.
Sounds good. Take care, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is old business, and it's 36 John Street. I did not get any updated information in my packet. I don't know if other people did, or I think this was, I don't know, Chick, is there somebody here to speak to the application, representing the applicant?
I think that is the proper question. This seems like, from my records, it was adjourned in October, November, and I don't think there was any correspondence in December. So it goes quite far back, and I think we've been waiting for an applicant to appear. Is anyone here?
Doesn't seem like it.
No, this was
I
an
don't see
interesting
anybody.
application. Oh, sorry.
I don't see anybody.
Oh,
Okay. All right, so maybe it just popped up on the agenda automatically because we had tabled it until January. May I have a motion? What do we do here? Do we just automatically extend it for a month, Fred?
I might suggest that we extend it for a month, but that we contact the applicant and, let them know that, that the application hasn't been, prosecuted. We've been waiting for more information, and we're going to extend it for 1 more month. But, if they're not going to move forward with it, if they're going to abandon it, then, I think we should let them know that if they don't get their act together, we're going to close the hearing, and they're going to get a denial probably without prejudice. But the ball's in their court, and we haven't heard from them. So I would extend it for 1 month, but I would kind of let the applicant know that this is the last extension.
So who,
What we've done in other cases, Marianne, I'd be happy to call the applicant just to find out if we can get an update and
Right.
back at the next meeting.
do
But
we
short
need-
of denial, they would also have the option to withdraw the application. Is that right?
Sure.
do we need, is a phone call enough or do we need to put something in writing as well, Chip?
Let me, check my files, see who the applicant was, reach out to them and find out the status. I don't think we need to put anything in writing, but it's certainly up to the committee.
Doris can also do that. As the secretary, she can reach out to the applicant as well and check on the status. I'll write a note on the agenda to have her do so.
Fine.
Okay. So may I have a motion to table this application until February 3rd, 2020?
I move.
And a second, please?
I second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Marianne, could I
yeah.
just interrupt for one moment?
Yes,
Didn't get to say anything in the very beginning, but I did want to introduce my associate, Brant Reiner,
ah,
who was attending the meeting tonight. Marianne, you and I spoke earlier in the week. Brant is a senior environmental scientist with NPV. And I just going into a new year, I know that there have been cases where I haven't been able to make a meeting or two, and I wanted to have some backup. So Brant is here to observe, contribute if needed. And I just wanted you to welcome him and introduce him.
welcome,
Very
Brent.
nice. Welcome.
Hi, everyone.
Right. I also,
Brant has a good amount of experience in processing permits, regulatory processing agencies, and has worked at other companies and is very familiar with the East End and the South Fork.
I don't know,
great.
there's some pretty big shoes to fill there. I don't know.
I don't think
My
he's
shoes,
filling.
my shoes are still in place, Herb.
All right.
Chick still has his shoes on.
Okay.
I also want to acknowledge that John Parker has joined us. He was here when we took the vote on 36 John Street.
Hi, John.
Hey, John.
He's here, but he's not really here.
So the next item on the agenda is 188 Redwood. Open hearing. Is there somebody here to speak to the applicant?
Hi, I'm Haley Willis, attorney for the applicant.
Hi there.
And I'm Adam Miller,
Good
also
evening.
attorney for the applicant.
Wow.
And I'm also going to introduce Chuck Hamilton, who prepared most of the materials that were submitted to the committee in advance of tonight's meeting. But
Also,
before
Haley,
I,
I'm also here, Haley, just
oh, the
FYI.
applicant is here also, Josh Schwartz.
Good evening to Chuck Hamilton. Long time no see.
So I'll just briefly start by saying that, you know, our client's goal, as always, is to be a good steward of the land and to protect the shoreline to the best of his ability. And after last month's, or a few months ago, the hearing, he really took those comments to heart. And one of the suggestions was to get experts' eyes on this and to really dig deep into the environmental factors at play. So he sought out a qualified expert to address and speak to the very technical nature of the application. So as I said, the materials that were submitted in advance of tonight's meeting were prepared by Chuck Hamilton of AM Weber Associates. And Chuck's qualifications and authority to speak on this topic are undeniable. He currently works as an environmental consultant, but formerly spent 33 years at the New York State DEC, where he served as their regional supervisor of natural resources and oversaw regional operations of various underbureaus, supervised development of unit management plans for state-owned tidal wetlands, coordinated enforcement and investigations under freshwater wetlands, tidal wetlands, and protection of water regulations. And he developed policies, procedures, work plans, and land management plans for the effective delivery of natural resource program goals and objectives. With over 30 years of experience in tidal wetlands regulation, management, and conservation, Chuck is a great resource not only for us and the applicant in demonstrating the necessity of the work that we've proposed in our application, but also hopefully for the committee in elaborating on the various environmental factors that are at play at this property. Upon Chuck's review of our initial application and looking at the property, he agreed with Costello Marine's assessment that the proposed bulkhead return is the appropriate solution for the property. Our application has been modified to include additional plantings on the subject property, which our client agreed to add in response to and in deference to the committee's comments at the last two hearings that we attended. So now I'm going to hand it over to Chuck, who will talk you through his process in evaluating the property and present his findings on the application.
Thank you. And Chairwoman Eddy and members of the Harbor Committee, Mr. Thiel and Mr. Voorhees, I welcome the opportunity to present some findings. Let me tell you what I have available. I hope you had an opportunity to review my report and some of the findings that I did, but I do have some PowerPoints available if you want me to go over them. I have a PowerPoint on the historical ground photos that was actually from Richard Warren, some other people of what this area looked like in prior years. I also have a trend analysis where I look at the tidal wetland maps from 1974 to current 2020 and demonstrate the aerial through aerial photography, the erosion trend that's occurring there to me. And it's mind blowing what's happening in this particular part of Redwood Peninsula. I then have another PowerPoint, and these are all probably 5 to 7 point PowerPoints where I can go over a close analysis of the 188, 192, 196 area from 2001 to 2020. And I have an actual close-up photography from 2014 to 2021 that really shows what happened at 188 and 192. To me, what's astonishing to me is the mountain retreat of the intertidal marsh, bog marsh that's along this area, and once that diminished, how fast it occurred at 192, and what's really happening along that whole western shorefront. And I have some probable reasons, boat wakes, northwest, but to see that bog disappearing is pretty scary when you look at the shoreline and you look at the development that's there, and there's no ability for those marshes to do that. And I also have a fifth PowerPoint presentation that I kind of go over how we went over the alternative options for stabilization at this property, looking at the current photography. I then had a section where I go over I want to talk a little bit about the Diamondback terrapin and any issues with that. I'd like to talk a little bit about a proposal to plant some intertidal marsh along the south bulkheaded area. When I looked at the findings for chapter 285, it says, think about doing some buffers, but also says, what can we do to restore wetlands? And since we mostly have lost wetlands, this is an area that I think we should try it. And number two, when I did go to the site, I did see one sprig of Spartina alterniflora coming up adjacent to the core logs. So I think there's potential for us to start reestablishing tidal wetlands in this area. And I'm not saying it's a mandate, but to me, it would be a mandate for us to really start looking at it. And you guys have done such a great job, looking at what's happening in the upland, how it impact, the water quality, and things like that. But on the other hand, there's so much destruction and alterations occurred to those intertidal marshes and now high marsh areas in this lower part of Redwood Peninsula that we really need to start looking at both those pictures. And I was very fortunate when I did this trend analysis. It's scary when you look at it. And it's going to take me about 10 to 12 minutes to do it all. But if you have the time, I'd love to show it to you, those photography. If not, I could show it at one of your work sessions or something like that also. But to me, it's astounding. When you sit and look at the shoreline every day, you really don't see it till you do these long-term trend analysis.
I think you should go forward.
Thank you.
Chuck, I just want to clarify real quick. These are all exhibits in the December submission, right? The December 20th.
Yes, Chick, they all are. Yeah, they're all, and I put them into a PowerPoint presentation, so it's a little bit better look at it. So I'm going to do my best because I'm learning to trade about computers, but I think I'm there, So let's go to slide number 1, which is an historic analysis. These are pictures taken from application files. and kind of show what the shoreline looked at. We're on the property of Druckmann, the property just south of 188. You can see we have in this photograph an upland area going into a high marsh area. And as we get to this photograph, we're now looking north at 188. You can see just south of 188 where the returns are and the proposed return is this grove of oak trees, somewhat stunted by the salt growth, exposure of salt there, but doing very well. You have this substantial intertidal marsh, and we'll show over time in some other photographs how they disappeared.
Mr. Hamilton, is the bulkhead that's there now visible there? Is that what I'm looking at right there by your?
Here's the fence, Chairwoman. You see the fence right here? I don't know if you see that bulkhead, but the bulkhead's going to be around that fence area. I can't quite see it, but if you look, see where I'm pointing right now?
Yes.
I believe that's an inflatable boat. If you look at prior aerials, the prior owner had like a float, one of those jet ski floats. And I think he had that right up against the bulkhead, because when you look at that, see right here? Okay, there's that
Right.
close up. And there's that there, but this is that marsh. The bulkhead is probably right in here. If you look right where that arrow is right there, I believe
It's
that-
all gone.
Yeah, and this is that whole thing. I'll show over time how it disappeared. Here's one of the trees at that time, but we had this substantial grove at that point,
And Mr. Hamilton,
You can call me Chuck. It's okay, please. Please.
you can call me Mary Ann.
Okay, thank you, Mary.
What was the date of the installation of that bulkhead?
The bulkhead, when I looked at it, is that the old one was a masonry bulkhead. And when I looked at the application and the pictures from when Costello Marine had provided it, it's a classic 1950s, more 1950s native stone, masonry stone, had been there probably since the 1950s. At the elevation it was typical of the elevations, about 3.5, 3.4 or 5, up to 4 would be common in the 1950s. So that wall was replaced, I believe, in 2014. But as I go through my photography, I think we'll be able to see that. But
It was 2014, Chuck.
14. Yep, thank
Yeah.
you, Josh. So now we're looking north, and again, the property line is right in here, and here's that intertidal marsh is right in here, and this is this oak grove that was in this area right here, and we're back in here right now. I mean, here's the high marsh. This is about elevation 3 and 4 and 5 here, but a really good mature, probably 40 to 50-year-old trees at this location here. So and then as you can see now we're coming to the upland. So here's that marsh right area, intertidal marsh here that had been there. There's the return, that bulkhead right in here that had been pre-existing right at this location here.
No, Chuck, can I interrupt? That actually that's the new bulkhead, because you see in the far, you see the paddleboard, and that's on the dock, which was built at the same time. So this picture was taken, this is post-construction of the bulkhead, the new the replacement bulkhead of the masonry.
Okay, great. Thank you, Josh. So that's
Post 2014 then.
yeah,
Exactly.
okay, so there's that, you can see the intertidal marsh right in here, and there's that new construction. See this elevation here, which would be the perimeter of the high marsh area. You can see there's been tidal flooding coming in this location here by some of this probably Spartina patents right in the
Is this picture being taken from 192?
Yes, that was
Looking into
taken.
188. And
Right.
where are those trees now?
I will show
On.
they're gone. I
Yeah,
was photography.
that's my
They were removed between October of 2017 and spring of April 18. I'll show you photography on that, Marianne, and how when they disappeared. Okay,
Were they healthy trees at that time, or had they?
yeah, you can look at these trees. They're very old, but they're classic maritime oak trees. With that exposure to the salt air and things like that. They, limited tree branch and things like that. But they're all every year that I looked at them at air photography, they had green leaves and they were in good shape. And again, this is a different shot. The house is now built at 192. Here's the bulkhead, as Josh has indicated, was built in 2014. You can see the buffer that's been planted when they installed that bulkhead. That's right here. And this is, as you look at this parcel here at 192, you can see the new plantings and panicum and some other species in this, I think it was a required 25-foot buffer. This was that former turf kind of area, area here that's now been planted. The turf looks like it has been removed in panicum place, probably on 18 inches on center in that particular area. But remember, here's that dock, and I want you to think about this dock here. Someone was mooring a dock here at this time. I'll show you some aerial photography over time where
It does show up, yeah.
it's not a good place to dock a vessel. I mean, to dock a float, because during the winter, this is just going to be beaten on this intertidal marsh. We've already started having, so if this is sitting and laying on it, it's just going to squash that marsh. So there's that intertidal marsh that we'll always remember that has been there for many, many years. This is this is a shot as the construction is now completed in 2014. Here's your return. That was an in-kind replacement of the boulders. The prior owner had placed some rock riprap. And remember, I had said that there was the float the jet ski float would be here, and they had their little Zodiac right in here. But that was at this location. You can see this is the intertidal marsh area that had been there. It's right up against the bulkhead, but it's got this classic bog right here. Good, the good mussels in there, the bank mussels in there holding it. But as you can see, we get those remnants and we get that wave attack. And my analysis, because we'll talk a little bit later as I go through this, is how the shoreline dramatically happened. How did it happen? And then I go look at aerial photography, and this thing seems to be going here, holding pretty well. And some of it may be due to some of this rock here. And you'll see some shots later on how this.
And how much fill do you think they brought in? Because I assume that this 188 had the same contour as 192, and we're standing at offshore of 192 right now, right?
Yeah. And this is
Looking
the
north
area.
Yeah.
The elevation of this bulkhead here is the same elevation as the prior wall. So this is probably just topsoil. This had been the persons who had the property before, when you look at aerial photography, it was their beach. It was kind of their beach here. And then
part of the approval of the permit, or the requirements of the permit, was to get rid of the beach and ready the area for planting of the buffer, the approved plants.
Yeah. So eventually we'll see how this has been. The beach was removed, which is pure sand. It had never had any vegetation. There's a bunch of chairs sitting out there. And this area has now been planted in buffer plantings, some maritime species. Again, and what's important to be looking at this right here now. Here's all those trees in the upland area. So you have a nice intertidal marsh area, a little high marsh area with some Baccharis ivor in here. Have a nice sandy beach, good area for the diamondback terrapins. You got a little cut edge, but it's a pretty stable edge, very stable beach grass. Here's that turf area that I kind of said has now been ripped out, and it was a pretty solid vegetation, ripped out and planted panicum 18 inches on grade. The reason I point that out is the stuff that was growing there was holding that soil pretty good. If you take all that out and goes 18 inches on center, you may not have the same stability with the root structure of the plantings that went in there. But you can see these trees are fairly old and in good shape. This is the return that's right here, right now. We're way past this here. If you can just remember, we'll see some other photographs, but we're probably coming back in here, at least eroded out to this point with that new area. And I think some of the surveys I have will show that.
So these core logs, oh, how lovely, wintertime. So we're going to have tomorrow, right?
That's tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right.
Tomorrow. So these core logs, are those, as far as you know, the same core logs that are sitting there? They've been the same ones for 7 years?
I am not sure on that, Marianne. I mean, the lifespan of them are usually 3 to 5 years. In the upland area, in the water, they're probably maybe 2 to 3 years. If they kept dry, they may last that long. But they're a pretty heavy duty silt control device, and they do have some value. I'm not so sure. John, the same ones?
Yeah, no, they're different ones.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because that's a pretty long life expectancy.
Yeah, these are, my experience is that they whittle away.
Yeah, they're about, yeah. So it's really, I'm sorry, Marianne.
One of the things that strikes me, if this is 2014, I went and looked at this site not only by land, but I went by boat, and we went close to low tide. And it wasn't dry like this. There
Oh,
was
yeah, this
water
is, I mean, to me, and I'm
all
gonna,
the way up there.
I'm gonna show you some air
Okay.
photography and some measurements. It's astonishing. We've lost almost 50 foot of wetland and upland area here. And this is just a shot. You can see they've planted their upland buffer area. And again, the reason I'm showing this photography, again, here's that intertidal marsh. You know, this is some of the things that hurt, and here's our marsh right here. This ice will hit this bog, cause some erosion, but it's usually, it just knocks it down a little bit, but it's more the wave action, but that's what it looks like in the winter. This is another shot, probably when the home was under construction. But again, we're gonna use this to show, here's the bulkhead, here's this extensive marsh here, but here's a marsh right here. Sorry. And you can see, we have a little cove here, but we're at this time, here's that stupid float again. And this stupid float may have been part of the cause of some of the damage as far as this intertidal marsh area and work on here. Then just another shot, you can see that over at 188, we have the new plantings, probably first season. But again, substantial trees. These trees are in great shape, these oaks. Very stable, turf there. That beach grass that we saw over here, there's that marsh right there. You know, everything's in real good, viable shape. This is probably almost a year later. That home is under construction. You can see the plantings at 188 are doing well. My marsh here is pretty good shape. It's really like an intertidal marsh, but I have a high marsh dominated by low vigor, alterniflora, and then a hedge has been built here. But again, there's that dock, but you can almost, if you look here, you can see some of the marsh that's still over here. You can see these, this oak grove is doing well. I mean, it looked like to me it had a red cedar too, which would be real common in this area.
You're suggesting that this is 2015 that we're looking at right here?
Josh, do you have a time on
Yeah.
that?
Yeah,
Help
it
with
is.
the construction.
It is. No, it is. I mean, just so we're clear, you know, my neighbor who owned the place was asking me to send updated photos because obviously they weren't living there at the time and they wanted to track the construction. So I was, you know, I lived out there and I was sending these photos. That's how you're seeing them.
Yeah, and of course you can see the classic wind here, that northwest wind here, which is probably going to be beating up the waves. And that's the wind that's going to hurt us. And we'll talk about that later on, a little later on.
Chuck, can I just say one? Can I just say one quick thing
wind.
about that picture? Sorry, Chuck. Somebody had brought up in the last meeting I watched. You know, I wasn't in attendance, but about the trees that were taken down. So these you see on my property, 188. These are two pin oaks, and there's one in the aft there in front of the house. I did for 3 years. You know, post Sandy was trying to keep these things alive, pumping them with whatever organic stuff the Save a Tree guy was telling me, and eventually came in and said that these were dead. So somebody had asked me if trees were taken down. I was advised to take these down and replanted the 2 with 6 London planes that are in the back. So just wanted to.
Yeah, and just in support of that, when you look at this oak grove, you can see how these trees are really in good shape, good leaf cover and things like that. And you're seeing the top of these canopy of these trees starting to thin out a little bit. That's aging, and that substantiates, I think, what Josh just said about they were starting to get ill.
So one question, your neighbor, you were taking pictures to sort of show him the progress on the house. Is it the same people who own that house now?
No, that house was sold February, I think, of 16. If I don't quote me on the exact dates, but I believe that neighbor never lived in the house.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I'm just going to go again. Here's the shots. It's good substantiation. Again, now we're getting a little bit better shot of that grove. You get an idea of the buffer being coming in very well. Current situation. Again, on this here is all of those trees, and there's one of the stumps right here, but that whole intertidal marsh, and I'll go through another shot. So,
what year is that picture that you just showed?
This is going to be it was actually this fall, I believe.
November. That was just November.
Yeah, November 2021.
You must have done it with a drone.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Jane Costello did that one here. So maybe I'll just talk a little bit about this march out here. There seems to be, there's rock back in here, and there's some rock here. And that And if you actually see this here, I believe what happened sometime in the past, one of the prior owners to Josh, seeing some erosion, so he or she dumped some of this cobble. It's all there, and it doesn't serve any purpose other than to protect an eroding, shoreline from that wind fetch that we get from this direction.
That's a pretty good purpose. Chip, didn't we see that on one of the permits? Was that the trustees or the DEC or the Army Corps that we saw
Yeah,
this?
it's shown on the Costello plans, the current plans for this project. It's shown on the.
And Bob Fox pretty much shows it pretty good on his thing. So it's for lack of a better word, it's almost a breakwater. It serves as a breakwater now.
Yeah.
If you look at that, when you think about our wind fetches here, because the one thing, and when I go through my analysis, I couldn't say, why is this right here? When I was doing because my first analysis was from aerophotography. I didn't get a chance to look at it. And only when I got in the field did I say, yes, that's what's saving this marsh right here. So I have an intertidal marsh right here, and here's my high marsh right in here, which is a pretty wet one now because of some of that sea level rise. And here's that 25-foot buffer that was planted on the auspices of the last permit from the Harbor Committee. And right in here is we're proposing to rip out this vegetation and add additional buffer in this area over here. It's part of our proposal here. But again, here some core logs have been put in here to just slow things down. But you can see this. What happens is, and I'll go over real quick, but once we lose this intertidal marsh, which is our natural bulkhead area, it hit the high marsh, and now we're into an upland area where those trees are. It's pure sand. You can see the erosive edges here. It's just going real fast. What makes me real nervous when I get over here, this is a high marsh area. High marsh is just like a sponge. It used to getting wet. They don't have a lot of bog, not as deep as an intertidal marsh you would see here. So what's going to happen here is this is going to go at a faster erosion rate than an intertidal marsh, which is, again, is your natural wave attenuating structure. Just real quick, and this is our current conditions in the lower part here of this thing. There's that new bulkhead. Here's the erosion just coming back in here. They're almost, they've almost to the point. This is their lawn. I didn't do any measurements and go on the property, but I think that 25-foot buffer is going to be close to being gone pretty soon here. So, okay, that's that presentation. Let me just get to I'll speed it up a little bit if I can, but it's really astonishing what happened here. Number two. Okay, all right. What I'm going to do here is this is my reference. This is a 1974 photography, which the tidal wetland maps were made from. Uh-oh, I went the wrong way, I think. Let me go back. Okay, it's really important here. This shows, this is 1974 photography, and the maps were 1977. But it shows we had a great fringe of intertidal marsh, narrow band, all in the one part of Redwood. But when we hit 188, you can see this is the person right next to him who was a bulkheaded shoreline. But we had a real good intertidal marsh along 188, 192. We have an intertidal marsh as you get farther south, but a great high marsh area here also. So, this is photography that shows current photographs, which is 2020. And what I did was did an overlay. This would be called the shoal and mud flat area. And this is the intertidal marsh as it was shown in those tidal wetland maps, okay? So, and you get a little bit of overspray because it's a GIS, but this is all intertidal marsh. You can see it's still right here functioning, still growing very well. So we had a little bit of retreat. This is 47 years later, okay? But when you start looking, and there's that little rock area would be right in here. But when you look here, we've lost this whole intertidal marsh's wave attenuation device. The upland area where the trees were is disappeared, and we're back into here. Remember, from this point on, this is the upland area, and the Harbor Committee's last permit had a 25-foot buffer, so we're getting very close on this. The reason I wanted to show a further trend, because not only this scour back, but now I've lost the whole intertidal marsh on the south side of this pier. So now I have this wave attack now coming into they didn't have it mapped as a tidal wetland, but this really is a little bit of a high marsh here. But now I'm getting concerned because see, then the neighbor, see the shoreline right here? this tidal wetland has come back that far. This was a high marsh, this green is a high marsh. We've lost this much high marsh in this location, okay? And now this is under wave attack. I've lost, again, my intertidal marsh at this location here. Then when you do the analysis all the way down and you look close, you go like this whole all these intertidal marshes, these light green ones are all gone. Only up in the inside part of the cove do I see there's really no change in the shoreline, but this whole area has disappeared and we're back. We're getting back into high marsh. And again, this is a short mud flat, this area here. But again, here's that property right here, the erosion, but it's really scary to me that we've lost all of this intertidal marsh all along the shoreline here. And
So the fetch is coming from the west
Long
here.
Beach, yeah, the West
from
Long Beach, yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
going around the peninsula, that area is in the lee of the peninsula, correct?
Yes, 100%, Mary. And I measured this up. This is about a 2100, 2200 fetch. You got a big channel here. So you can get some good wave energies and wave action in here. And the other thing, unfortunately, as you look over time, I see a lot of things called docks, new docks. So that tells me there's a lot of boat traffic here. And I did speak to Josh and I said, Josh, do they have like a speed limit in this Sag Harbor Cove? And he said, no.
Oh, that's not true.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that is true. That is
And-
true.
In
It
that
is
part
true.
in that part of the cove, there is no wake limit.
Yeah, absolutely. Just so we're clear, right at where that turn takes place at the bottom where Chuck was
That's where it
pointing out.
starts, yeah.
Yeah, right west of that.
So
Would
this
be-
is 5 miles an hour inside here.
Exactly. And then you
But out
come
here
west.
is whatever they want to do.
It's open speed up until you get back to the other.
There's
I think
a
Herb-
quick fix.
I think Herb,
Yikes.
I'm not
That's
sure,
a
but
quick
Herb,
fix.
you live on Cove, right? Herb,
Me? Yes, I do, yes.
so you
And I-
know, it's open speed limit. I think you have a
Well,
boat too, so.
I do. So right around where the arrow is, I think it kind of, it kind of comes down to a 5 mile per hour, but
Okay.
up
So-
around north and west, it's, in fact, that's where a lot of people do water skiing.
See, water skiing
Right.
here. So when we look at, wave attack and things like that, we look at wind first, and then we look at boat actions. And in any area that we have intense boating acting, it's a chronic, wave action, you're going to have some issues because, the good thing about winds is they don't come every day. The problem with boats is they're pretty intense use. So, but again, it's over time. All this happens. So I plotted the tidal wetland boundary in red, and the blue is actually where the tidal wetland boundary is at this particular time. I kind of plotted it. And what these measurements signify is how much retreat in the 188 to 196 from 2001 into 19 years, how much it retreated. In the 188, we had a retreat of the shoreline about 10 to 13 feet. At 192, at best, it was 57 feet, 53 feet, 39 feet. So major erosion. But even here, I'm at 8.7, 14.4. So, when you do it over a 20-year period, you're, half foot a year on some of these areas. But when I actually hit 192, I'm at like 2.25 feet. That's that's worse than Long Island Sound. And so I did another overlay here, and this again shows the wetland line in 2001. There was a little gap right here, and you have this here, but this is that dramatic change here. And you can see I still have high marsh here. I'm in pretty good shape. You can see what I've lost in those 20 years. All right, we'll go to the one. I'll speed it up if I can a little bit.
Chuck, I just wanted to clarify something just for the record. The photographs showed before, are they part of any exhibits that were submitted?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have 12 exhibits, and
I see 11 in the submission. Some of them are-
oh, okay, 11 exhibits. Yeah, 12 is going to be the new survey by Costello Marine. Okay, 11. Yeah. So you would see these exhibits in exhibit 5, 6, 7. They'll be right in there. And if you want, I can.
You have this.
You have this. I can transfer these.
Yeah, I have all those exhibits, but I thought
Okay.
I saw some that I didn't
Yeah,
in the submission.
Excuse me,
But as
We-
long as it's submitted, it's fine.
Okay,
We don't have it in the file. So if you could email it to us so we could also have it on the file, that would be great.
Right.
I do,
Okay,
just want to say that Laura from our office did submit the 12th exhibit, so you should have everything.
Is that the one that you emailed?
I've got a sheet of paper
that's
in
what
my
she
file that says Exhibit 12 and it's written on it pending.
okay, yeah, so we 12 and is the new Costello plan that we have. Well, if you don't have that, we'll make sure you get that.
Yeah, I think everything was most recently submitted on the 21st, but it's all
Okay.
been sent.
Thank you.
Okay, we have stuff that was delivered to us on the 22nd. Yes. Looks like it was emailed to you guys also on the 22nd by Doris.
Right. What you're showing right now is something that I remember seeing before tonight. Some of the other pictures that we've seen tonight, I'm not so sure, but there's a lot of pictures. So
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mary Ann. What I can do is
don't apologize. It's great.
I can transfer these PowerPoints to Mrs. Alvarez if that's okay, or to you, Chick. Who would I do that to? Or
You can go through the building department office, either Doris, Heather, or Carrie.
okay, so I'll transfer all these PowerPoints to you guys.
I think that would be helpful.
Thank you so much.
Mary Ann.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So again, this is this one I highlighted. I'm focusing in now on these properties now. So when you start looking at 2004, you start seeing the seaward erosion of the between 2001 and 2004, the seaward erosion of the intertidal marsh. I'm trying to figure out what's going on here, you know. Then we get to 2007. Now, right here at 192, I'm getting all this erosion of this marsh. I'm getting a little bit on the exterior part of that marsh. Here is the bulkhead at 188. But again, I'm just getting a little bit of marsh erosion up here in this area here. So if you look at it, it's pretty much steady, except the more erosion is occurring in the center of 192. By 2010, we've lost all of this marsh area here. I'm getting a pretty good retreat of that intertidal marsh at 192, bulkhead at 188 here. This is pretty much steady state. And you actually look at 188's intertidal marsh retreat, it's pretty much the same. Some erosion, but nothing you're going to get nervous about. And this is, again, the upper limit. The blue line is the upper limit from 2001. So 2016, this shot is after Hurricane Sandy. You guys can probably tell me a little bit more about what kind of wave action you had, if any. But when you look at this, I've lost at 188, I've lost this area, the seaward limit. I've lost this here, and the rock is still here, right at this location. Again, there was with a rock or marsh here, but this is where we're really starting to see some erosion right here on the seaward side. But what's happened is you get down farther, because I'm trying to say which way is this going? See, so all of the tidal wetlands on the south portion or just north of that dock have disappeared. Now the water is coming up around through here. So I'm getting undercut, back cut on the side of this marsh, but I'm losing this also. So the erosion is actually coming from south to north, going up to this really, we saw in 2014 how thick that marsh was at that location. But again, I'm seeing some erosion over here, but nothing dramatic. But this is quite a jump. Now we're back to 2020. And so remember, these photos are 2001. Lost this area, kind of lost this area, but again, that might have been interpretation of the rock. But I've lost this whole intertidal marsh, high marsh area, and this is all upland that's disappeared by 2020, and the whole tidal wetland area is gone. And now we're into an upland area. Remember, we had planted a 25-foot buffer from this lawn out to this area here. And the one thing you see here in this 2020, you don't see any trees. There's no trees here. And I'll prove that or show that how that happened, when that happened. But we're getting accelerated erosion here, and it's because we're right into an upland sandy area. We're into high marsh areas. Again, they're a sponge, they kind of absorb it. They don't have heavy, deep bog like an intertidal marsh is. So wave attenuating tidal wetland type has kind of disappeared in this whole shoreline, except in this area. And you have that boulder stuff that's kind of holding that here, and so it's good. But retreat here big time. There's that. This thing was covered by a marsh. It was protected by this marsh when it was constructed. Had been like that since the 1950s. Now we're past that return and coming back this way here. Okay. If I can do one more shot, I'm sorry I'm taking so much time.
It's all right. It's a big application. It's a big question.
Well, to me, one of the most productive things, of course, support the application to the degree that I can. But the second aspect is to help you guys really see what's going on here. And I thought, to me, it was so critical what happened here. I just never had imagined something was this bad on the shoreline. I never would have envisioned that, driving down the road, looking from Long Beach and seeing what's going on. I just never would have saw it. So these are near map photographs. It's an aerial photography, comes out every 4 or 5 months. But what I'm showing here's 188. We actually can see the property lines. So I want to say something about the property line. See the property line? That's the map line. It's plus or minus a little bit. But when you look just north of 188, you can see where the bulkhead is. That tells me that bulk was built a long time ago, probably it's offshore of the map line. That's probably not a good thing. But just something to think about as you go through things.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. Could you just say that again?
Yes, see these yellow lines. These indicate the
Property lines.
map property lines, deeded property lines on it. So when you
It's
look
from the tax map.
from the tax map, and exactly. So when I look at something like this and I see this, I say, that bulkhead's probably not inside its deeded lines. And that's, again, that also indicates to me the age that this probably was done in the 1950s, 1960s. That's how long that's been bulkheaded. But again, no marsh there. But so when you start looking along this yellow line, it gives you a better idea what has happened on the shoreline since the map subdivision in the 1930s. But in reality, we know, looking at the photographs in early 2000, this really happened in the last 20 years. It didn't happen in that, 40 years before that. But again, here's that marsh. Here we are in 2014 close-up. Good intertidal marsh. I'm getting some erosion here, but here's that stupid float, which is, floating and hitting. And remember, there had been a marsh out here.
I'm sorry, I get easily confused. So
Okay.
where your cursor is right now, that's 192?
Yes, this is 190.
Right. And then
This
right
is
there,
188. With this
188.
line right here. Here's
Right.
this is
So
2004.
when you were talking about the bulkhead being built seaward of the property line, that's actually the property beyond 188, correct?
Yes, that would be
I thought you were
north of
talking.
188. Yes, right here.
Right,
Right here.
okay.
And there's
all right.
that difference. See that difference right there, Mary?
Yes, I see that.
Yeah.
I thought you were making that comment about 188, but I'm with you. Go ahead.
You can ask me to slow down. I do talk fast. I apologize.
No, it wasn't clear that you were talking about whatever that is, 184 or whatever.
Yeah. So here at 188, you can see the new bulkhead has been installed in 2014. You can see the buffer area, 25-foot buffer area has been planted. There are those trees that Josh had worked on trying to get restore. Here's a red cedar tree in 2014. Here are those oaks right in here. So this is that little grove where that turf area was in 2014. The new home has not started any construction. This is an upland area. We knew it was about a foot higher. Remember, we dropped down a little bit, and you can see right here where the area used to get inundated. But real substantial, good marsh in good shape.
So let me ask a really naive question. When they drew this tax map, and you said it was in the 1930s, were all of these boundaries on solid ground?
Yeah, most subdivisions always go to the apparent high water or mean high water.
Yeah.
Lands are owned, of course, by the Southampton, trustees. So all deed restrictions, when you read these deeds on Redwood Cove or Redwood Peninsula,
right,
going to say to the waters of Sag Harbor Cove, and they're going to go say 180 feet, to the waters. And so when you see a new survey now, you'll see what we call a tie line. that's usually where mean high water is now. A lot of times when you look at a survey, you'll see a line offshore of high water, and that's just the map. They call the file map line. I think, Chick, you have some of those in the file perhaps?
Yeah, I'm sure we do.
Yeah, but that's all. To me, it's as a person trying to do trend analysis, I'm trying to figure out, what happened. And again, even if you look at the shoreline, it's pretty static. Even over here, see, even if that's the map line, see, there's been a retreat, but it's a common retreat. Even at our location, that distance there, see this distance, that's a pretty much. This is so dramatic. This is just incredible.
So I'm going to just bury into this for one more moment.
Sure.
So the actual property that's owned by 88 and 92, it is now, if it were to be surveyed, it would be to what the current mean high water line is.
Yes.
And these yellow lines out there are like long ago and far away. That's just history. That is no longer their property. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Correct.
Once properties are, I'm sorry.
No. Finish that thought, please.
Once, there's this thing called erosion. And if you lose your property by imperceptible amounts called erosion,
Right.
you will always read to the waters of Sag Harbor Cove, you lose it. If you lose it by what we call avulsion, which is a sudden loss as a result of a catastrophic storm or things like that, then you might have a right to get it back within a certain amount of time. But once it's lost imperceptibly, like this has occurred, that becomes the waters of the town of Southampton. If it was on Long Island Sound, it would become the waters of the state of New York, or whoever owns the bottomlands, basically.
Actually, this is Will Sharp. I was speaking to Jim Grimes about this the other day.
Yeah.
Because there's an issue in the eastern part of Sag Harbor where there was a tremendous amount of redistribution of sand, and it changed the property substantially, maybe added 20% to a few of the properties. Mr. Grimes is of the opinion that there are some interpretations of, so we were talking about, well, that access is below mean high tide, and it really changed the perception of that. And I'm looking at this project and wondering if Mark Zuckerberg owned 192, he would have no problem hiring you and the DEC, et cetera, to put in a lot of sand.
I would not recommend putting sand, because there's two ways, is where you put sand in the sand environment. This is not a sand environment. When you look at the littoral drift of this, there is no littoral drift. This is a wetland area. This is not where you put sand. Sand nourishment is more for like beaches, whether it be Peconic Bay, Gardiner's Bay, Long Island Sound. But to nourish this right here, it's going to do nothing.
Well,
an environment and no littoral drift at all.
I guess the question we had was, at least I had the last time, was that if your client reinforces his property, it looks like the property to the west is going to constantly erode. Doesn't he have, as of right, the property at 192 to mitigate that in some, if it's not sand, some other way?
No, I mean, once he's lost this property, he's obviously lost this property in the last 20 years. He doesn't have a right to come back. He has a right to make an application out to the appropriate.
Well, that's okay. So,
but there's no as of right. There's no as of right. He lost that property.
Well, at the eastern end of Sag Harbor, somebody was losing their property, and access to the beach was completely not possible. We went to a DEC deal, and now there's substantial real estate in front. So, in fact, if the powers that be allowed, my concern is simply that if your client does something, it has an impact on the adjacent property. Maybe you just say, well, that's their problem. But for clarification, can you advise us as to what, because the layperson would think that your client's property is causing erosion somewhat. Maybe you're countering that, but it looks like it's eroding pretty substantially there. And part of that is due to the hardscape.
Nope, that's I with all due respect. Well, I disagree. When you look at the photographs I showed, the erosion actually occurred starting in the south end. There was a marsh area in here. It started eroding here, and then even in this time in 2015, it's coming around. You look at the pictures over time, the erosion comes from the south. This marsh has disappeared. Now I'm getting a back cutting of the marsh. This was a contiguous piece. I'm getting back cutting coming through here. I'm getting wave attack here. And, docking this float on top of this probably impacted somewhat, but this is the erosion was from the south to the north. And that's what my trend analysis demonstrates. If I can go to I might have to go back. Let me see if I can go back here. Those other photographs, I'd have to go back to the other photographs, Will, to show that this is, I'm only doing 2014. I did this series of photographs because this is after the dock, after the bulkhead was constructed at 188. But you can see I'm solid right here. And if you go with the toe scour or bulkhead scour is causing the diminution of the marsh, I think this is way too far away. You're almost 80 feet away to cause this to disappear, okay? And even now you can see this is how this is going to erode. And you can see this is still touching this. There's been no change here. And again, those other lines I showed show a line of erosion. So with all due respect, I would say this is not a toe scour event. So now I'm up to 2016. I still have this, marsh, but I still have this, and I'm tied up. Here's that grove of trees at this location. I'm in March of 2016, but this is probably laying on it, but I'm still getting erosion back in here. And again, my theory is, so here's October 2017. Here's 188. Here's that grove of oak trees. You can see that marsh is eroded back even farther, the intertidal marsh, and it's coming from the south. There is some from the north, but again, that's from the undercut coming this way. But this is going here. So at 2017 October fall. But when I get to and I start looking, you can see the massive amount that's came from the south. I've had more loss from the south than this, but this thing, and again, it's a bog marsh. Once bog marshes become unstable, it's very difficult to stabilize it. Here I am in 2018. Remember that grove of oak trees and red cedar trees? Gone. Here's the new house and all this. Here's a new lawn. Here's a little bit of buffer, but all these trees are gone. And now the intertidal marsh that had been here, see the pieces that are here left? That's what happened. And it came right from the south. It just came right here. And you can see this coming back in here. And it's just that classic retreat. Once you reach a certain point of instability, it's very, very, it just accelerates. And now I'm into the sandy substrate. I have a path coming in here now. You can see the plantings with the panicum grasses. But again, I had good turf. Now I have this, not necessarily a great root structure here. But it's going fast at this time.
Chuck, can I say one thing, Marianne?
Sure.
John, just Mr. Sharp or Will, I listened to the meeting last time and I appreciated, what you were saying and the concern about scour. I'm no expert, I admit that up front, but I've read for now 2 months and I went and hired Chuck. I'll tell you, if this the God's honest truth, if I learned that my bulkhead was causing this, I swear to you, I would be here proposing something different. But I've lived at this place, and I am assuring you that that is not what's gone on here. And Chuck is an expert, and Chuck came to this on his own. Otherwise, I don't think he would have been working with me. But I have seen what's gone on, and in the time since this house was built. You see the bog marsh that was up against the upland return, or it was in the I guess the high marsh, or there was some intertidal marsh. That's been wiped out. The tree that was adjacent to it. This has happened in a couple of years. And I would like to just highlight one thing. When we started this process, which was 3 years ago, it was clear, although we would have come to you guys first, except at the time, the Costello, who's been in business for years, it was pretty clear we go and we get the other approvals first. And this is the nature of this, so there were a couple of things brought up, but I wanted to assure you, from an observational standpoint, this is a situation where this stuff has been rolling from the south towards my property. And, that's also, if Chuck had come up with some different view, then, we'd be here saying something different.
Chuck, assuming that that's correct, in fact, it is going from south to north, I don't think I've heard a description as to why you think that's happening. What's causing this erosion? If you can
Okay.
even come up with a reason, if
Sure.
there is a reason.
Sure. Yeah. Remember, I had an intertidal marsh fringe right in here. Okay. You remember that green, that light green line that we saw in the
Yeah.
plan
Yeah.
map? That's a wave attenuating device. Intertidal marshes, and they're on bog. The bog is about 12 to 18 inches high. Fixed pretty tight with bank mussels and things like that. Once that intertidal marsh and bogs are very prone to wave attack, whether it be boats, wind, or anything like that. And the mussels, start dying out, or people pluck the mussels out for bait and things like that. We used to do it all the time for winter flounder. That weakens the bog. But so that bog always, and remember, I had that one photograph here where we had the low-lying marsh, and remember there was a couple pieces you could see hanging out there. That's a classic aging of marsh, but it goes over time in a very slow process. I mean, if you're up in the back part of the harbor, you're not going to even see this. It's not going to change.
Right, but what accelerated
Wave
it in the
attack
last?
area.
But what accelerated it in the last 5 years or so, which is what I think you were saying earlier?
Well, what happened is it was only a certain width. Let's say it was like 8 feet wide, let's say, okay? And when I get to the back foot here, I lose that. There's no backbone to it. And right is a high marsh area, which is a sponge, the salte and the high marsh. And that has a thinner layer of bog. So once that gets attacked, that goes even faster. And then when I hit this back sandy area here, that's eroding away and that's getting low. So these plants, the intertidal marsh wants to get wet once or twice a day. The high marsh wants to get wet 2 times, maybe 3 times a month. Once these things start getting too wet, high marsh, it weakens the plant, and they start dying out. So it's a combination of a lot of factors, Herb. But my theory is once I lost this intertidal marsh, I had a thin band of high marsh here. This went, the high marsh couldn't take the wave attack, thin bog. Why not? Yeah, you had to have a thin bog. But then once I hit the upland area, which is all pure, almost sugar sand, goes like soup. It's.
Do you think wake restrictions in that part of the
My
cove opposite the
recommendation-
properry would be
My
beneficial?
recommendation is 100%. No wakes within 1,000, 1,500 feet. Because I will give one other recommendation after that, and I'll probably never be allowed in Sag Harbor again, but that's nothing. That's okay. But I'll give you a recommendation. Again, by November 18, I'm in bad shape. I've lost this whole intertidal marsh, high marsh, and things like that. September 2019, when you actually look at the erosion here, this is 188. The most massive erosion, this whole shoreline, is this, and that's because I had a thin band of intertidal marsh erode, very thin band of high marsh, and once I hit the upland, and it's all about observation too. If you're a property owner, you have a responsibility to maintain your property. And if you start seeing erosion, things like that, they have a responsibility to maybe think about what's going on. And maybe, to me, and we're going to talk a little bit about it, but I'm going to talk about where I think we need to go. And if this person comes and asks me what to do, the first thing I'm going to tell them is we better start planting some marsh right here, right now. And I'll tell you why, because this is all high marsh. I mean, I'd almost want to knock on these neighbors' doors and say, that looks pretty good there, right? But we're getting the high marsh here. Remember, that's the sponge, shallow root, saute, and things like that. This is going to go at a fairly fast rate, just like that did here. We really need potentially at least start planting some Spartina alterniflora here, which would act. And again, it's going to be an elevation thing. I'll just do a little discussion on that. But again,
So let me just ask you the one question. If you go
Sure.
back to the previous
Sure.
picture, you're talking about these other properties south of 192 that you say are highly vulnerable and that you would think that they should be taking some action now. Why? The only difference I can see between those properties and the one that is so badly eroded is that the one that's badly eroded has a bulkhead to the north.
Well, I think what it is remember, this erosion is going here, and see this difference right here? See this right here? See this right here? This was formerly intertidal marsh in the 1974 photograph. This was the intertidal marsh here. To me, the integral key integrity of this whole area was related to that intertidal marsh. High marshes are not meant to get wave attack. They're an absorber of floodwaters, pollution control, habitat for birds and wildlife and things like that. They're not meant to get wave attack. And that's where we're at. And that's why, and you can see right in here.
Oh, yeah, I understand that, but I'm still not understanding why. I mean, these properties, wow, somebody's got a dog fighting operation going on. So these properties down here to this, I don't know what direction that is. I always get turned around, but.
Me too.
All right, so like, beyond 192, they are nearly as badly eroded as 192. And the striking difference that I see is that 192 is bordered on the other side by this bulkhead.
And the one issue here is I have here's a bulkhead right here. I have the same attack, and this marsh is doing very well right in here. And again,
right, but it's got those rocks out there, right?
Yeah,
it's got like protective barriers in the water.
But the erosion occurred once this intertidal marsh left. The high marsh washed away, and now the upland. It didn't come, because if I go with that theory, that meant the erosion started here and then would go down a certain point. But when you look at bulkhead scour and or wave reflection, which is an energy, when waves are coming against a bulkhead, the class, yes, you do get wave action. You get what we call a reflective wave, and that wave will go back out. It will go this way, and it will go this way. In this particular area, when you look at the wave action, it would not have impacted this particular area at all. I mean, there's no
Marianne.
Yes.
Marianne, can you hear? I'm Lee Spiegel. I own 192 Redwood.
Oh, wonderful to see you.
Yes, yes, nice. Well, it says Stephanie, but my name is Lee. Stephanie's my wife.
Yes.
So yeah, so Josh and I had discussed my erosion, and I was not aware of it, until he brought it to my attention. So it's like, and the trees that Josh says I took down, I did not take down. They were knocked down in a horrible windstorm, and I just cut them down because they basically had already fallen down, so it's like, so it wasn't done intentionally, so it's like, and Josh had mentioned that there was like seagrass here, and that it was taken out by me or my caretaker, which is not the case, so basically I haven't done anything, to cause erosion on my property or erosion on Josh's property, so it's like, I want Josh to be successful in whatever he's trying to pursue. And then I'm obviously very concerned about my property having all that erosion. And he had asked me if I was going to be interested in hiring Chuck, and I'm not sure if Chuck would be willing to work with me, but I mean, to see, all the erosion, I mean, it's obviously very concerning. So it's like, so I just want to let you know that I am listening to the meeting, and I'm very concerned about my property as well.
So we are delighted to see you, because we were wondering where you were.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And because this doesn't seem like this is a problem that follows property lines, that there's a problem here that is transgresses or crosses property lines. And it seems to me that maybe the solution needs to cross property lines.
Right.
We can't
And
just
I'm willing to do
188,
whatever.
192.
Yeah, I'm willing to do whatever is necessary, to prevent further erosion or to regain. I know that I lost land, according to Chuck. The high water mark is I guess used to be here and is now not there. So that is land that was once mine and now is considered not mine. So obviously that's the house was a big investment for me, and basically to lose land in and of itself is very concerning. So I would do whatever was possible to try to prevent it from continuing and to regain some of the land that had suffered from erosion.
It looks like there's a domino effect coming from the east as well. And I suspect that 188 back in the 50s was witnessing the same erosion that Mr. Spiegel's property is now experiencing. And so they built a bulkhead. And that made sense because you're protecting your property. And the people to the east built their bulkhead for the same reason. You don't just build bulkheads, you do it because of erosion. So I think there's a domino effect. And I think Mary Ann's point is really an important one to consider in the analysis. And I think the littoral drift is one aspect of it, but what we're witnessing here is pretty substantial. And I think there needs to be a holistic approach to this.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, obviously, you know, and again, I'm very fortunate to have met Josh and also be giving you this presentation, because I say you know, as a person who I did a lot of wetland regulatory and protection programs, and it's actually a chance to read chapter 285 and the findings are just outstanding. It talks about buffers and things like that and restoration. So I'll get into that in a minute of some recommendations, but I just want to again show here's a wetland as it was in 2001, and here we are in 2020. And obviously, Mr. Siegel, you can see the massive, the high marsh had been back in here. Now we're into the upland area.
Right.
Yeah.
So I didn't build the house. I bought the house already built, you know, so it's like I wasn't part of the process of the construction of the house. I bought it.
When did you buy the house?
I've owned it for 6 years. I bought it in 2016. So.
By the way, it should be stated, I spoke to Lee, you know, after the last meeting, and I went and I approached him, you know, about trying to do a joint thing, which you guys had brought up. The issue that came up, there's a few things that come up, you know, because it's one thing to say that, and you know, and if it was easy to do it, we would have done it already, you know. But then some real life things get in the way. One is, you know, I'm losing upland soil, and as Chuck would say, like, you know, this stuff, it disappears in an instant. So something, you know, needs to be, so like it's already, if you went there today versus October, there's 5 feet gone. The other issue is about, you know, who pays for what, costs and all this, and then going back and, you know, you have to start after 3 years, you'd start from the beginning. So then initially Lee and I had agreed we were gonna propose something jointly. Right. And then after getting into the details, what I spoke to Lee about, you know, we haven't gotten to the proposal yet, was that, you know, you had mentioned this living shoreline, and you had suggested, Mary Ann, looking at the Peconic Land Trust. They had some videos online. We went and we looked at them, you know, and Jane Costello did. I looked at 2 of them. You know, in there, they even talked about one of the projects, like the living shoreline that they attempted, it didn't work. And they suggested, you know, that there's some combination of, you know, hard structure, living shoreline. So all this was discussed with Chuck, but just getting to Lee's point and the idea of that this stuff goes across property line. Look, I think Lee and I both agree that, you know, neither one of us wants the property disappearing. So what I said to Lee was that because, you know, the town trustee owns this land now, right? That I wouldn't be impeding on his property. I would propose, and I'm stealing Chuck's thunder here, but that, you know, I would bear the cost and burden of and responsibility to mitigate this and try to restore some intertidal marsh. And then if Lee wanted to, he could pursue going across the rest of his property line, you know, separately. But that, like, you know, obviously, like, I have a concern for Lee as a human being and a friend and a neighbor, but, you know, on some level, I also have a serious issue right now. And so we needed to address it, you know, after 3 years.
I guess part of our concern, and I think Chick Voorhees, our consultant, can speak to this much better than I can, but we're not really convinced that any of the potential solutions that you have proposed are going to safeguard your property. And that you might be back here in 3, 4, 5 years with a bigger problem. So that's why we're trying to, really step back and figure out what is the holistic response here. And that's why I'm so delighted to see that Mr. Spiegel is here and is concerned about his property, because he was a
Yes.
voice that we weren't hearing at all. And it was like hard to imagine how to have this conversation without him. I understand it's hard to like do things in combination, but I think now for the sake of going forward, I think Chuck, you probably have some, where do you want to pick up your presentation?
If I could just finish this, I think Will, I wanted to show this to Will. If you look up on the north part of 188, 13-foot retreat, 10-foot retreat at this point. I have a 52-foot retreat here, 57-foot retreat here, 34-foot retreat here, 39-foot retreat, 8-foot, and 14. So that tells me in the analysis here that this shoreline here of 188 and these areas down here pretty much have the retreat that is the same. It's this massive erosion here at the 192, and again, it's pretty massive, and you can see it's pretty consistent down here in a 35-foot range. This is just a classic where I had that big intertidal marsh here, I had that finger, I had that here, and once back cut, upland just flies away.
So I think we've gone through the history quite a bit. Maybe that's your summary. So let's move, I think, on to.
Okay, so I can give some
propose.
recommendations. My recommendations. Mary Ann, did you want me to go over the standards for permit issuance? I had that was in the back part of the report, the last 12 pages. Did you get an opportunity to review that?
We went through your whole, application. Chick, where do you think we should go from here? We are now at almost 6:30. Not that we don't have unlimited time, but.
I'm sorry, yeah.
No, this is a very important application. This is very complex and we don't want to like cut it short in any way. But I'm also thinking about how we can be as mindful of the time without, sacrificing any information or thinking on it. Chick, can I ask you what your thoughts are here? Chick, are you on mute?
You're on mute. Chick, you're on mute.
So sorry.
Okay.
I think
Now you
Chuck,
have your thoughts together.
Chuck should finish, based on what he'd like to put on the record. I will say that we do have all of the exhibits, the report that does look at alternatives, and the section that does cover the Chapter 285 standards, 285-9, and the various points therein. If it's redundant, I think you can omit it. And then I do have some questions that I'd like to go through when that's done.
Okay, I'll give a quick sum up. I have a PowerPoint, but I'll give it to you guys first since you already have the data.
Well, it might be better if you give us, some of us learn better by pictures. So again,
Okay, good.
it's
All
5
right,
minutes difference and.
I have to find PowerPoint number 5.
Okay.
Uh-oh, it's not there. Hold on. Let me just look somewhere. There it is. Are you seeing this yet?
No.
Okay.
Carrie, are you sharing the screen? I think you must have, because we've seen all the other pictures before.
He has access to do it.
For some reason, I'm just having this little, this is, I'd like to get this in here.
Sometimes if you exit out of all of your windows and
Okay.
then go back in, it will let you do it.
Okay, we'll try that. Okay. just gonna have to back, let me give her some of these here. Can you help me?
I think you want PowerPoint 5, right, Chuck? Do you want me to-
PowerPoint 5, that's what I need. I can't believe this one.
That's all right. Just
Opening it up
breathe
now.
deep. It'll come.
All right, let me try this here.
So you're gonna do it?
Yes.
I'm gonna do it.
Okay, because I could.
Okay, is that showing you?
That's it, perfect.
Okay, great.
Perfect. Okay. And this is the property, and the application is to construct a upland 24 extension to an existing bulkhead. That would be along this location right here. I'm gonna jump ahead a little bit. We're proposing that this is where the buffer be expanded additional feet, so we'll have 30 feet. This is an area that I am proposing 600 to 750 square foot of intertidal marsh be planted at this location. The purpose for that is when I looked at the findings of chapter 285, it said to create buffers, but it talked about, we, as in the findings of why we're passing this law in Sag Harbor, that we need to really see what we can do to get the upland buffers in to protect the water quality, but also what we can do to restore wetlands. And I said, we
Are
really.
you pointing, Chuck, are you pointing to an area? Because I didn't see the location where that's proposed.
Do you see my arrow moving?
No, it's because
No.
Haley's.
Because
Haley.
Haley's
Oh, Haley.
sharing.
Haley.
Oh, there it goes.
Haley, thanks. That's Haley. That's not me. Oh my God. Haley, can you go up to the return? Right, yeah, right,
Yeah.
right. Keep that right there. So that area there is we're proposing that we create, we go about 15 feet from, and I actually am proposing that we plant from mean low water check all the way up to high water. The reason I'm doing that lately, normally intertidal marshes are in the upper third of the tidal range, but lately I've been noticing that intertidal marshes are growing almost to low water. And that might be their response to sea level rise. The other fact is, I'm looking in this particular area that we're going to plant there. And again, you can show that arrow there, please, Haley. Right there. It's going to be about 20 feet off, but and up to 50 foot in length coming off here. That's 600, 750 square feet. I'm going to do potted Spartina alterniflora 1 to 2 years old. We'll put them in 6 inches on center, real dense, super, twice the density you normally do. And I'm going to run it from low water right up to high water. That way it would be simply on, not on the property of Mr. Spiegel, but on the property of the town of Southampton trustees. And we're going to put back almost in the same footprint where an intertidal marsh had been. The only difference, however, is it's not going to be on a bog. It's going to be about 12 to 18 inches lower, but it's going to give us some wave attenuation device natural in that particular area. And if that and we're going to watch that marsh and see how it grows. Am I going to have the same wave action that I had before? Yes, I am. But I'm going to have these staked potted grasses. Hopefully they'll grow, they'll intertwine. We're going to watch how they grow. And we're going to see what happens, and see if, and I like to take baby steps when you do wetland plantings.
Well, I don't know that you have time for baby steps, but why wouldn't you think about adding sort of the rock like there is along the length of that bulkhead that's been really quite successful?
I thought about that, Marianne, and I'm just, I don't like to do things that are unnatural, that are not naturally occurring. And when you look at, it's not a natural environment to have rocks in that location. If I saw after one season
It's
that
not natural to have a bulkhead.
I know.
Hey, Chuck, let me just say one thing. I hate to, I just want to point out, if you look at this overhead and that marsh there, the marsh is armored to the south end, the big thick end. And this is an important idea. You go out there right now, there is not armament on that side, and it is fortified with mussels. I just want to point this out because there's still this discussion about that the scow or the bulkhead somehow causing this. What is that? The northern end, which is the thicker part of the marsh, is is not armored. The armor, in fact, on the permit that I got to build the bulkhead, I believe that it said in there, that the harbor committee at the time wanted that riprap, sitting there, and it wasn't touched. And it's so there. I imagine, there's the stone that's further out in the stuff that's eroded away, but the stuff that is on the bog that is on the northern side is not armored. There are one or two rocks to the north side of the dock, but to the south side of the dock, up until exactly that area does not. That's fortified with mussels. If you go across the dock and that small little sliver, there are some stones there.
So what are the mussels clinging to?
The mussels actually live in the bog.
Oh, bog.
They're bank mussels, we call them, and that's their it's a natural process, natural habitat. And again, going with a pure planting of Spartina alterniflora in that 600 to 750 square foot area, that will grab organic debris, that will start helping build bog when we get that growing there. And the key thing that we're looking at is and again, over by the core log, I saw one or two sprouts coming up, so it indicated to me that everything is right, that we can do this. And again, wetland plantings, tidal wetland plantings are not always successful. In fact, 90% of the time, you have to go back and do things. It's very difficult to get tidal wetland plantings, and they do require some maintenance. But once you get them going, they're okay. But you really have to work on it. The substrate is low in nutrients. They prefer to live in a more organic type of sediment, which is not here. So that's why I propose doing double the density. I propose going from mean water, high water, down to low water to cover the maximum amount of area and see how they'll grow. I'm going to be looking at some of the nurseries that trying to get a genotype that goes with a lesser inundation period for those the upland area, but ones that can take more inundation on the offshore end. Which when I say that genotype, then I'm probably looking for some, if I can get some North Shore high tidal range plantings, that's what I want to put in there, because they're a lot tougher than some of the South Shore Spartina alternifloras. That's kind of what we're looking for. And let me give some recommendations. My first recommendation is that we need to conduct a trend analysis of what's happening along this whole and perhaps whole village of Sag Harbor, number one. And the second is you need to really stop the boatways. That's number two. Number three, this planting here is going to be a great experiment and a great way to start seeing wetland restorations work. You know about the living shoreline policy that's been established throughout the East Coast in planting Spartina alterniflora, but they're mostly in Chesapeake Bay. It's just become something new here in New York. Most of the ones in New York have failed. And the way they simply did it was they took a pile of rocks, dumped it somewhere in the intertidal zone, placed some sand landward of it, and planted some salt tolerant plants like Spartina alterniflora.
I kind of think that's not totally accurate from what I know of Widow's Hole and some other.
Widow's Hole is a different situation from wave action, but
well, they have big fetch too, and one of their self-criticisms is that they need to put rocks in the water to break up that wave action before it gets to the shore. But I don't want to take you away. I'm not comfortable with your saying that all natural shorelines in New York have failed, which is kind of what I heard you say.
No.
We're not as advanced as Maryland, as Chesapeake, by no means, but I think that we're learning and we are gathering speed.
Sure, yeah, it's being done in Mauritius Bay and Stock Bay, and we've had some failures, but we've had failures in wetland planting since the 1980s, and we're keep learning about how it works and getting better at it. And the natural shoreline obviously is an evolutionary change in tidal wetland planting. I agree, 100%. Okay, you're gonna have to advance this for me, Haley, please. I'm sorry. Again, we've reviewed, the long-term erosion, what's going on this western area, tidal wetland area of Redwood Peninsula. There's a retreat that's primarily intertidal marsh, and once that disappeared, we saw the high marsh and now the upland, especially at 192. We did look at some alternate shoreline stabilization. I'll talk about that in a little detail. I'm recommending that we plant an intertidal marsh area of a 600 to 750 square feet in the area just south of 188, and that we expand the upland buffer. Okay, next slide, please. And again, my conclusions are that primarily erosion has started from the south end of 192. It worked its way up north so that the fringe tidal wetland area did disappear and the high marsh and now the upland. The erosional period was pretty dramatic. Long-term trend, however, the negative aspect is it's definitely migrating down the shoreline from 192 all the way down. I think we showed you that. And as they erode away, those remaining wetlands are much more prone to wave attack. They're not built to take wave attack. So we're going to start seeing accelerated erosion. So loss of intertidal marsh was the leading factor for increased erosion in that 20-year period. Next, please.
Can I ask you a question? It's Lee
Sure.
Scrivo. So
Yeah.
basically, with the extension of the bulkhead, extending to where Josh wants it. So how is that going to affect my property in terms of like when the water hits the bulkhead and basically, comes back onto my property? Is that going to increase erosion on my property?
Well, what we're going to be doing, this is a great shot here because you're going to see, you see the core logs right in here. Seaward of that is where the marsh is going to be planted. Pretty much seaward of that.
That's my property, right? With the
No,
core
that's
log
not your,
part.
below high water is below your property, okay? We're going to plant below high water in the bottomlands of the town of Southampton trustees.
Okay.
That's where it's going to be.
And
the
Chuck,
reasoning,
that photograph is probably not high water at that point, right?
no, yeah, that's, and again,
Maybe mid-tide or a
requested
little.
a survey, yeah. I've requested a survey. We're going to get a little update, but yeah, the tide's off, but not, it's not high tide, but it's not low tide, right?
Right, okay.
So we plan in that area over there, and the concept is to see if I can restore in the sandy substrate an intertidal marsh area at this location.
Can I just add something? If the theory was that it was coming from the north, you see, there's a bulkhead to the north of Josh's property that would have been gone already, right? This intertidal where you're
This on the
arrow
seaward
was.
side of, on the seaward side of that marsh.
That
it's
would have been gone.
Solid, and as Josh indicated, that's an area that is a bog. It's about 18 inches high, 24 inches high, and it has the bank mussels pretty much embedded in it, which indicates a good deal of stability. And what you don't see in front of those two marshes is the pieces that would fall off. When you're getting an eroding intertidal marsh area, you'll see pieces of the intertidal marsh right on the seaward side. You don't see that. So that indicates a fair degree of stability in those marshes. So it's not coming down the shoreline. Again,
I don't know how, from a lay point of view, I don't know how you can say that. It just seems that it's the domino, that from the east, you have hard surfaces which have precipitated a very different response to the west. So you have one hard surface that we see in the screen, the dark bulkhead that was built there at some point. And in the 50s, the adjacent property was built because that was what was going on. It's the same thing that's happening at 192 right now.
I think, Will, if you go back and remember, if you look where the dock is up in the upper left-hand photograph right there, that was 10 foot of a retreat of that shoreline in 20 years from 2001. As I came down south, the retreat of the shoreline was 35, 37, 53, and 39. So if you take the domino theory, you wouldn't see increasing erosion the farther you got away from that structure.
Right.
If there was
So you have-
increased erosion rates at the hard structure, then that would be it. But when the erosion rates are higher away from it, that indicates it to me it's more a different process. It's not.
So you have that picture with those dimensions in the application, correct?
Yes, I do.
Yes, you did. Great.
Yes.
So you were making some suggestion as to what your recommendations are?
My recommendation in the area with the arrow is that we will be planting potted Spartina alternate flora 1 to 2 years old, staked in from low water elevation all the way up to high water. Those properties are owned by the town of Southampton trustees. And we'd have to go back and let them know we're going to be doing that, but it's a pretty quick approval, easy approval. Establishing plantings is generally compatible, permit required with the D, so that should be a fairly easy process and would allow us to potentially be starting doing this work next spring. If we had to put in a rock break wall or other structures for this small planting that we're doing here, you're probably going to be in, you're going to have to go back to the Army Corps, go back to trustees, go back to the DEC, and of course, get new plans to you. So we basically would be starting all over again to do a mitigation restoration project here. And in my opinion, I would prefer to get in next spring, do some planning, manage the restoration effort that we're going to be doing here as and work our way through it rather than go into a high level type of structure and alteration that may not be absolutely necessary. I mean, if we plant the marsh, I see some erosion, we probably would stake some core logs on the seaward side of that newly planted marsh, and that would attenuate any kind of wave action. In the water, they're going to last about 2 to 3 years. And if it appears that core logs installed on the outside of that area attenuate the wave action, then we might go to a more permanent solution. But again, altering ecosystems, altering habitats is it's better sometimes to go a little bit slower before we go fast.
Well, you're talking about planting Spartina, but you're talking about that in combination with extending this bulkhead by
That's correct.
24
That's correct.
feet,
And
correct?
the bulkhead that is being proposed is in an upland area. It's not exposed to the water at this particular time. It's about ready to become. It's between two shrubs where that's, but the area where the bulkhead is proposed is 100% upland area, not exposed to any wave action whatsoever. You know, it's about 2-3 feet back behind those.
Well, aren't you taking out those core logs? Those core logs are in the water.
They're not on the property of, they're more on the property of Mr. Spiegel. They're several feet into Mr. Spiegel's properties. Well,
they've kind of tumbled down into Mr. Spiegel's properties, correct?
Well, I'd have to look at the survey.
They were set up that way. That Lee and I had a talk when this whole thing started. I asked them if I could put them on, and initially they were further out. If you look at some of the photos that are in the exhibits, you could see there are some stakes that are, where there's nothing in it. That they were first out there, and more erosion came. So then, this is the second or third iteration of those logs, but they're on his property.
So I'm sorry, when you say they were further out, meaning they were further into 192, or they were further in? They were further into 192.
Right. What happened was that I think that I'll use Will Sharp's commentary. I'm a lay person, but there's this eddy now, and my experience is in these big storms, it seems like there's been a lot of winds coming from the east,
right?
And this thing is coming and backing into. You're coming around Lee's property and then back up, kind of out towards the west and washing it out. And so that land got washed out. Somebody made a comment last time about that the logs weren't staked properly. I want to assure you, I had people put those logs in that put logs in. These guys, they've put them in on Robbins Island and various other places. These things were staked well. It just got wiped out.
Right. Mr. Hamilton, Chuck, have you finished with your recommendations?
Marianne, did you want me to go over the alternative discussion? Or would you just prefer to do the one that you want me to explain it to you? Or because it is in the report.
Right. This is the one that you would like to go forward with. And then there's other considerations in the report. I think maybe we should pause there and let Chick ask some questions.
Sure.
Chick, does that sound like it makes sense?
Well, maybe if members of the committee have questions, that's usually kind of go in order.
Okay.
Well, I'll ask a question then. I just want to be clear here. We had an original proposal, and then we've have some changes to the proposal, and I just want to know exactly what it's being proposed that we're going to vote on. As I see it, the original extension of the bulkhead is still being proposed. And what is added here are plantings. Is that correct? I mean, you're still proposing the original extension of the bulkhead, 24 feet or so. And that now you're proposing some additional plantings. Would that sum this up correctly?
Yes, Mr. Walker. We'll be doing a 600 to 750 square foot planting of intertidal marsh area and adding an additional 5-foot buffer to the 30-foot buffer that's over by the that particular area, that right there. We're going to add another 400 square feet of upland buffer will be added. So it'll be 400 square feet of upland buffer, 600 to 750 square feet of intertidal marsh, and the 24-foot upland extension of the return.
And then I'd like to ask for Chick's opinion on that as to how that compares with the original proposal and how he sees that as to whether that's appropriate, adequate, et cetera.
Sure. So all we have at this time that I'm aware of are the original Costello Marine plans. And those show basically what's proposed. It's an extension of the bulkhead landward along that portion of the property that we've been talking about. I haven't seen any plans for the intertidal marsh plantings, and I don't believe anything's been submitted for the 5-foot extension to the buffer. So I do expect that those would be forthcoming and would need to be submitted and reviewed. It's pretty straightforward, and Chuck identified, the plant material and the spacing, which is good, but we'd want to see some type of plan. But along those lines, it does appear to me, and maybe if I could just share my screen.
Sorry, Chick, I don't mean to interrupt, but I do believe that we submitted a planting plan. It's
We
Exhibit
did.
12 is the planting plan, which I can pull up.
What's the date, Haley?
It's Exhibit 12.
Oh, okay. That I never, I have not received it yet. So if it was submitted, that's great.
Yeah.
So this is a photograph basically at high tide looking, and I'm going to call it west because I think that's the basic orientation, but it is confusing. And this shows the core logs at the property line and a pretty high tidal event. And, when I was there, there's a couple of feet of water up against those core logs. So, and that's the existing condition basically. So, I have a question about the accuracy of the plan, the way it's depicted now, because it appears as though these areas would potentially be below spring high water where work is occurring if those core logs, are modified. And that kind of goes to one of the questions that I think Mary Ann asked before. Also, it does appear as though the trustee's permit may have expired. And, Chuck said it should be pretty easy to get permits for plantings. That's good. That'll be helpful. But I do expect you may have to go to the Army Corps of Engineers also, or at least have a nationwide permit review based on these conditions that we're seeing at high tide. So Mary Ann asked a question before that I thought was, fairly insightful. And we've had a lot of debate on, basically what's causing the erosion. And, I just don't completely accept that the existing bulkhead has nothing to do with erosion in that area. Because I think you do have a corner situation with one side unprotected and one side having a hard surface that's going to deflect wave energy. And you do have about a 1,200 foot fetch toward the southwest. I saw Chuck's one figure that showed the fetch to the west, and it's bigger, that is true. But the front of the bulkhead does have other wave attenuation factors that are still intact. But this is basically an unprotected corner. And I agree. I think boat wakes have something to do with it. Storm events, Sandy after 2016 showed impacts. And there is a trend in loss of wetlands along the shoreline. But what we did see is this entire corner was completely removed. And the photograph analysis and trend analysis that Chuck showed, had this polygon of bog and intertidal marsh that's completely gone, where you have recession in the southern segments. So I guess all I'm saying is that I think there could be a partial factor having to do with a hard structure adjacent to an unprotected shoreline. So, what can be done about that? And I actually think we're pretty close, and I just want to throw out a couple of ideas, and I think this does tie into chapter 285-9 and erosion controls or shoreline stabilization structures. We do have to seriously look at alternatives. I thought that the report was a little bit weak on that. It was very quick to dismiss any kind of rock riprap solution because it would cut into the property. And, that may be true. And obviously you're looking to support the 24-foot return extension. And then it was also quick to dismiss, just a soft planting solution, and I would tend to agree. I don't think either of them in themselves are going to be that effective. We're very, very pleased to see Mr. Spiegel here, the neighbor at 192.
Yeah.
I really think that some type of a combined solution is needed. And, this, Chuck, you discussed this a little bit before because Marianne asked it, but do we think that some type of armament, riprap at the base of the existing, sheer bulkheaded return would help to dissipate wave energy and potentially avoid that deflection of waves that may be causing some erosion?
Chip, you're saying in this area?
Well, yeah,
Yes.
obviously, yeah.
And then let me just finish. Well, actually, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, obviously, if we put some rock where that arrow is, because the reflective action of any kind of wave is going to hit that bulkhead. It's going to go up, it's going to go out, it's going to go in, and it's going to go out into the water. So energy is going toward land that you would abate if you put some rock. Yeah, that would work. I mean, that's
And then
so what
when I
size
say
rock
that-
do you put? Do you put like large 300-400 pound stone? Do you do 10 to you probably need 20 to 50 pound stone there, and you have to pile it up.
Well, I think you have a good example of what's there now that's really working as a shoreline protection device, just because it's been there. So I think I would make that because it's been effective. And then when I said I think we're close, I would just say as an alternative, and this is what we're obligated to look at under 285. What would be the effect or beneficial aspects of putting in a wall, not necessarily a bulkhead or an extension of the return, but just setting it back a little bit so that the core logs that are there are kind of able to remain, and maybe you shore them up with some armament that would also help to deflect wave energy. And maybe, as you said, Chuck, you do have the Bacchus there, maybe you could plant those as they are and see if you can get something established. I think that might be something to look at just as an alternative. It's kind of a hybrid, but it achieves a number of purposes. It softens the shoreline, it dissipates wave energy, and it still provides the protection. And it's also reducing the amount of disturbance, directly in the area that, as I showed in the photograph before, I think that, this is an area that's inundated. This was a normal high tide. So I think that, it has a number of multiple benefits that can be considered. Now, as far as, and I will look for Exhibit 12, and that's great. Chuck, you talked about using core logs to protect the Spartina alterniflora plantings. And I think that's a great idea. I've had success with that technique on North Shore Harbors. And, you know, I think it's probably another layer of permitting, you know, way better than I do. DEC would probably see that, you know, a little bit of a fill action, but one which is intended to promote the recreation of intertidal marsh. And I have gotten those types of things permitted before. Given, you know, all the things that I mentioned, that I think you may need a revised trustees permit, or at least a renewed one. It seems to have expired. I don't know if Haley.
Chick, we do have a renewed one.
Good, okay. And I think you may be in front of Army Corps of Engineers for work below spring high water. And, you know, I just don't want a short-term quick solution to get in the way of a longer-term combined solution that may require, you know, a little bit of extra permitting steps, but makes a huge amount of sense in this area. And I think all of your work is very valuable in demonstrating the need to establish the marsh, protect that corner, dissipate wave energy, and promote intertidal marsh growth. You know, if you have to go to those agencies again anyway, let's do it right and do it once and get Mr. Spiegel involved if needed. You know, if Mr. Schwartz is able to do it on his own and just get some sort of an easement to work in that area that is on the property, but is still trustees' land. You know, let's take a little bit more thought and care and try and come up with a better solution. So those are some thoughts. Great presentation, very informative, and certainly the overall recommendations are really important to the village. So thank you.
Welcome. So the first thing, obviously with the spring high water issue, you know, again, I think one of my exhibits, if you go look at my exhibit, exhibit 11, but I pretty much show where the shoreline is, and I'm not convinced that the proposed location of the bulkhead is at or below spring high water, which is the jurisdiction of the Army Corps of Engineers. So we will work with Mr. Fox to give us a new survey.
Okay, it seems things.
And that
so,
new
yeah, we want it to
survey.
be accurate.
Yeah, yes, of course. So we will have Mr. Fox do a new survey that will show mean low water as it exists today, mean high water as it exists today, and spring high water as it exists today. And from that, we will go forth.
That would absolutely answer the question.
Yep, so we'll do that, because that will then tell us if we're within the jurisdiction of the Army Corps of Engineers. I'm just going to go down two paths. The first path is if the wall is going to be below spring high water, then of course we would be going back. We would be going to the Army Corps of Engineers for that approval.
Right.
The second path would be if it's above spring high water, we would not have to go to them, and the project would stay exactly as it's designed. But I just want to make sure I heard what you kind of one of your thoughts and recommendations was that we build a wall that's in line with this bulkhead, but in front of that wall, we plant some some bushes, and then leave the core logs there, and perhaps even put rock in front of the core logs to give an additional stability to core logs. Core logs are temporary devices. Core logs are not a permanent solution. I cannot for them as a solution to shoreline erosion. It's like putting sandbags on a shoreline. That's just my feeling, you know.
So I'm not sure you heard everything that Chick said. Is that I don't think he's suggesting a wall that's on the same line as the bulkhead extension you're proposing. I think what we're thinking is that this wall, if you will, actually be receded sort of into the property, and it be at the level of the yard, but it be there for support. But then it ends up being, it gives you the basis for having a more tapered, softer shoreline. Am I correct, Chick? This is what I think.
Yeah, and that's really
Okay.
taking one of the alternatives that Chuck presented in the report, which was just a 1-on-2 sloped rock face.
Right.
And making a grade transition that does two things. It lets you do a rock face, sloped rock face or core log with planting seaward of that. And it gives the property owner at 188 the protection behind this softer shoreline solution.
Chick, can I butt in and ask a question? Because I'm confused about, I'm not an expert again, but you know, what you have here is virtually right now 20 feet that, you know, at the highest tides get exposed to water and at many tides don't, right? If we are going to do what you say, what you're suggesting, and, you know, I think your reasoning that you proposed, one of the reasons was, you know, to reduce disturbance to the area. I mean, I wonder why the disturbance to certain areas is more concerning. Like, what if you come and look, and I invite anybody to come look at the property, what you will
I've been to
see.
your property many times.
Well, have you walked on it?
Walked on it, and we took a boat trip. We took
Yes.
like a skiff in there.
So you will see. So then you know that in order to actually have a resolution, and by the way, this is all with love and affection. You know, I love Lee, and I'm glad he's here. But you know, Lee also has the house on the market. So like, you know, I don't know what will go on. So, but if I am going to try to use rock to have this push into my property, right? Number one, if you will see that the area is exposed to water. So whether it's exposed, and there's sand and water. So I don't understand why if I push it back 3 feet, that's a superior solution. And in that event, what I am disturbing instead of sand is I'm disturbing mature trees, mature shrubs, and you know, it doesn't make sense to me, all because of, you know, this speculation about, you know, the impact of the scour and all this, which to me, when we look at the pictures, it doesn't seem definitive. And I respect the idea of, you know, looking at other alternatives and, you know, be happy to look at them. But this idea of asking me to push back into my property more so that we can not disturb sand, like all I feel like that accomplishes is I lose more feet into my property. And, you know, and in the end, I have a hard, like, I also don't understand why a rock is considered softer than a vinyl bulkhead. If I go up to that bulkhead, I can actually press it. It moves. If I go up to the rock, it hurts me when I touch it. I've cut myself on it many times. Like, I really appreciate the intent here. And I'm trying, you know, like I'm trying to do the right thing. But I also feel like there are, and I could see if this was out in Sag Harbor, you know, right out where you're taking big waves coming in from Peconic. But like, I live here, you know, to me, to think that this is caused by scour when we're getting like at the most, you get a foot of wave action, you know, that's not what's happening. This erosion that happened here is that there was erosion in here for I think the reasons that Chuck is saying. It tore through the high marsh. It's exposed to sand, and when the sand gets exposed to water, it turns into soup and goes away. I mean, if I don't do something, you know, like eventually those trees you see in the picture, they're going to go away. And to build that wall that you're talking about, those trees are going to go away. I mean, you're talking about putting that rock wall right up where the trees are. It's going to disappear. Like those trees, the shrub will disappear. So I don't understand why it's superior to you know, destroy that versus, you know, build a vinyl thing in the sand.
I don't think that we're suggesting. Chick, go ahead.
Yeah, so first of all, we are obligated to look at alternatives. So I do want to make sure that we meet the letter of the law. I think that the presentation and the documents that were submitted are effective in supporting your protection of the property, but we see goals, you know, that go beyond that to try and improve the situation. And I think that all the questions are asked, and this is a discussion, you know, this is not a directive at this point, but they're asked in that vein to allow us to conform to the intent of Chapter 285. Secondly, this is for you to consider. Take it back and think about if you can accommodate some of these suggestions that we're making, because I do feel that it does improve the situation, creates better environmental conditions, potentially reduces erosion, gives you the protection you're looking for, and is a softer, and it is truly a softer solution than just a vertical bulkhead. And then I would call your attention to, I think it's sheet 5 of 7 of the pending plans, which shows, and there's even a cross section in one of the other figures. It is sheet 7 of 7, that the area behind the bulkhead will be completely excavated and disturbed, and dead men and tie rods will go in there. So, the logic that the vegetation that's there will remain is not accurate based on the plans that we have in front of us. So, really what we're saying is, instead of a shoreline bulkhead, which actually needs more of these tiebacks and tie rods and dead men, if you step it back a little and then have a more gradual armament transition to the water, that area in back can be planted, just as you would have if you excavated that for the dead men and tie rods. So it's really not that much different in that respect. So, I just want to be responsive and let you know that it's part of a discussion, and that we are looking to comply with, how we believe and have in the past exercise the committee's obligation really under Chapter 285.
Well, if I can interrupt here, one, I'll say that I suggested rocks instead of the extended bulkhead at the last meeting, but that's neither here nor there. I think what we need is a final proposal that we can vote on, and I think the applicant, we've had an hour and a half of discussion, and I think the applicant, has a lot of alternatives and a lot of opinions that they've gotten from the committee, but I don't see there's anything that we can vote on, today. So what we need is an adjournment in order to get a final proposal that we can vote on.
I would agree. And I think that's where we were headed, John. I don't think that we're ready to, if we were to vote on what's been put in front of us, I can't say for sure, but I think that we would tend to deny it. So
For what reason, Marianne, if you don't mind? For what reason for what reason would it be denied?
Because I think that there's better practicable alternatives. And that's what we want to explore with you. And that's what we were just listening to Chick talk about, something that we think is going to be more effective. And it may not be the ultimately correct solution, but we feel like we need to go down that road.
But I think, again, Mary, just to support Marianne here, I mean, I think we need a final proposal. I mean, I'm not going to say what way I would vote, but partly because I've seeing alternatives here, and I don't have what I would consider a final proposal in front of me, and unless you want to say that this is your final proposal, that we can vote on. But there were some questions here as to whether you needed another permit, et cetera. You talked about having another survey. If there's other things that need to be submitted, then they need to be submitted before we can vote on this. So it seems to me there's no alternative today other than to adjourn this.
We've not made a determination that this structure is above high water. This structure, based on my exhibit 10, it is above the spring high water. And that was as of March 2021. The reason I said I'd get a survey to help, of course, verify what Chick is saw in the field, but this structure, when it's on, you look at exhibit 10, again, it's my colored map. It's clearly in an upland area. Nothing's changed at that point. So we're not going to require a Corps of Engineer permit. I would get a survey to help verify that, but we're not going to change the plan. The plan is still going to be a 24-foot return. We're going to do supplemental plantings in the upland buffer area. We're going to do supplemental restoration and additional mitigation in the intertidal zone and create a marsh. That's our proposal. It's there. It's in the exhibit 12. It's a Costello plan. It's there. You know, Chick has asked us to look at some alternatives, and I'm okay with looking at alternatives, but I'm not so sure that's going to be a feasible way to go about doing it. If the concern of the committee is toe scour or a bulkhead scour, and if you told me that when these two returns meet, because the problem right now, the structure is being proposed on an upland area on a property line of Mr. Schwartz. Right now, the core logs are on the property, the upland abutting area of Mr. Spiegel. You can't jump over and start doing things on that property. We're going to have, you'd start the whole permit process over. If on the other hand, you're concerned about toe scour and you told us the best thing you should do is this return that's existing there right now, you put some rock at that location so that it would mitigate any kind of toe scour coming off that existing bulkhead that is somewhat in water, at least 3/4 is in the water, exposed to wave action, and your other one's gonna be upland. That would be a good mitigation to do. Just put a rock scour pad there rather than doing a whole rock shoreline in an upland area. When Chick talked about, yes, the disturbance for the tie rods would be about 8 feet off the property line. When we start doing a 1-on-2 slope with rock in an upland area, waiting for the water to come to it, I'm not so sure that I'll discuss that alternative. You're going to tear up something. It's not even going to expose the wave action. If you're concerned about potential toe scour off that bulkhead, reflective wave energies that are going up, they're going out seaward, they're going to go to the south, and the other fourth energy vector will come upland. Then you put a couple rocks like we have at that terminus of that existing rock, and that should abate your wave action. That should work right there. If that's a recommendation you want us to do, we can modify the plan and do that. But I think and we're doing something that nobody else has done in their applications, with all due respect. This applicant, this person has said, I saw the wetland disappear. I saw it go away. I don't know what happened. I hired Mr. Hamilton to look at it. He looked at it and says, wow, it's eroding and it went this way. So let's do this. Let's go back and start planting marshes back there, what had been lost by Mother Nature. That bulkhead had been there since the 1950s. Toe scour didn't happen because he changed the structure. That stone wall was just as hard, just as reflective of wave energies as that vinyl bulkhead. So
Mr. Hamilton?
Yes.
Yeah, so we've been going for quite a while. I think we're kind of going over ground that we've already covered. And I think that we need to adjourn. I think we all need to go and think about what we've all said here. And see you all in February. Do you agree?
Jane, did you have something you want to, I don't want to call you out, but I saw that you might have been wanting to say something, Jane Costello.
All the talk about the rock, I just want to make sure everybody understands there's an access issue on this property to bring any kind of heavy equipment onto the property. The property is only about 80 feet wide. You can't get any major equipment. So the size of the rock is going to be only what men can take into the property in wheelbarrows. Then also we bring in a truck full of rock. There's no place to really dump it, except we're going to destroy Josh's front lawn. So
Can't you bring it in from the bay?
Yeah.
There's no water depth, and to bring in the barge and lay it, our cranes only have about 100-foot reach. So we take a barge in there, lay against Josh's dock. We're going to take rock. We're going to have to dump it in the water, and from the water, bring it back. So it's kind of like double dipping, and it'll cause more problems than anybody would want to say. So the size of the rock is
complicated, but I don't know that sounds impossible. I mean, I think we have a critical issue here. I think we're all,
you don't want us to dump
we agree on. Huh?
You don't want us to bring a fully loaded barge into shallow water, sitting on the bottom, then take rock, dump it into vegetative wetlands, then have to pick up and disturb those vegetative wetlands. I mean, it wouldn't even make any sense whatsoever.
Well, I don't want to be argumentative, but And maybe John, just a minute. When I went in there by boat and we were in there at almost low tide, there was no seagrass. There was no seagrass there. And I don't have the answer as to why, but I just throw that out there. It's now like 7:15. I think that the thing that we need to do is we need to adjourn this application until February 3rd. May I have a motion? Fred, is there a problem with my asking for a motion to adjourn this until February 3rd?
No, there's nothing wrong with asking for a motion.
Was there any
If I can
opportunity
interrupt,
for the public?
if we've got, is this an open public hearing and are there other comments by anybody
Yes.
else here?
There could be.
Right. Is there anybody in the public, in the audience, who would like to speak to this application? You're so good at remembering that, John.
Have
You know,
notes.
I should put a
Yeah,
little
so,
tag on my, I
Mary
don't
Ann?
think there's anybody. Yes, hi.
Hi, Lee Spiegel. So, Josh had asked me to put the logs on my property and I, was a good neighbor and agreed to allow him to put the logs on my property. But they're just, they don't look right. I mean, it's like they're just, it destroys the, the look of my shoreline, so it's like, so I'm not happy with the logs being there, so it's like, so that is an issue that I have, so it's like, he was a good neighbor and he was concerned about his erosion and I was very naive about my erosion, so it's like, so what I did was to help Josh and, the logs, just kind of shifted and, just kind of disappeared and I'm not sure I want those logs there, so it's like going forward, so it's like because it's an eyesore, so it's like, so that's my 2 cents. So it's like with that.
Right. So you have concerns and issues about your property as well. And
Yeah.
I can certainly see that that go beyond core logs. There are not,
Right.
I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. We hear you.
Okay.
Is there anybody else in the public who would like
Yeah,
to?
yeah,
comment?
last thing for me, it's Josh. I appreciate, first of all, I know how Lee feels and it's his property and he's obviously, in my opinion, entitled to, do whatever he wants with his property. So he could certainly take those away. He's been kind to keep them. I will just tell you, it's another reason in my mind for doing what we're trying to do here, because the second that those things go away, that area of property will disappear. It's sand. It's held that if you look at what's remained versus what's gone. So just, I appreciate Lee's concern too, Mary, and I would just tell you, I don't think you could ignore it as just a justification to not want to do the, an extension. And by the way, we're going to absolutely, I'll go with Chuck and consider everything that you're trying to, tell me, and I'll try to do something that tries to consider everything that you guys seem to want while getting a solution that works. But, it's another thing, like Lee and I think have a difference of view, which is just the nature of life, and it's his property and it's my property. And so like, yeah, I can't tell Lee to keep the logs on his property forever. And the minute that they go away, I'm going to lose more property.
The only thing that I would ask you to do as you're sifting through these various options is to not give too much weight to the fact that you would have to go back and get more permits. I think everybody here wants something that's a sustainable, long-term solution, even if it's something that needs maintenance. But the fact that you might have to go to the Army Corps, depending on the survey, if you have to go back to the trustees, you have to come back to us. This is a big problem.
So I have a question here. Let me ask you this. You guys want some armament, right, for the proposed intertidal marsh, right? First of all, as Chuck said, I'm willing to do that if I have to go back and because the reason we talked about it, and I will say, I was probably my idea. We'll have to go back. It'll take another year and a half. So let's try this maybe. And Chuck says we'll go slow. Chuck definitely doesn't like introducing unnatural things, right? So I appreciate your comment about the bulkhead is unnatural, but again, there has to be some give and take. From my understanding, and Chuck can speak to this, our proposal meets the code requirements, but like, I'm willing to do this. It's an expense to bring, the rocks are not huge. So that's why Jane can get the rocks in if they're gonna armor the new bog. And I'm willing to pay for that. But I do truthfully believe, you know, if this was your property, you'd be scared, okay? This thing, every January and February, I'm losing feet of property. And I think, and Chuck, you know, this upland extension meets the code, but I am willing to do a combination where I'll go back and I'll ask, you know, with Chuck's help, again, this is if Chuck thinks it's viable when we get off, to armor the marsh in concert with doing this upland extension that keeps my property intact while this stuff takes root. Because I mean, it's scary stuff. I show up there, I'm like, what's not going to be there? So I throw that out there. It's like, I'm willing, I'm not somebody coming to you unwilling to, you know, put and take, as long as we're not breaking code and laws. And I appreciate that there's preferences and everything, you know. So I just throw that out there. I'll go with Chuck and we'll discuss this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
You bet. May I have a motion to table this application until February 3rd?
I'll move.
Thank you. Second? Second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Herb. All in favor?
Thanks everyone for your
Aye.
time.
All right.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.
Good night. Take care, Chuck. Good to see you.
Chuck, good to
See you
see
guys.
you.
You too, Freddie. All right.
Long time since Boax, my friend.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Relax.
One of the best.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is 40 Redwood Road. Is there somebody to speak for the applicant here? Oh. Maybe not. Why don't we move on to the fourth item and then we can come back and see whether or not somebody comes back from a dinner break.
It's up to you. I think that based on the last meeting, you had asked me to prepare a permit for 40 Redwood.
No, we were asking to see a new planting plan.
Isn't this the marina?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I thought, no, I thought we really wanted to see, you know, what the numbers were in terms of how much they were going to be, you know, converting to buffer and how that looked and how it looked with the plans for Cove Road.
I thought we approved that.
No.
Well,
I don't think so. We don't have minutes, so we can't tell. But you did you write up a decision on this?
I did. We worked with the applicant, and that was my, you know, I can check my notes, but I'm pretty certain that we were very close to that. And
Well, we might have been, but it's here under old business. It's not, we haven't even closed the public hearing on this.
right, okay.
Let's see if somebody surfaces. I am not seeing drawings that I thought answered the concerns that we had. A planting plan.
We should definitely get a presentation and go through
Right.
that.
Let's do that.
Billy
Okay,
Mack from First Coastal is supposed to be doing this.
right,
Yeah, it was Billy, yeah.
right. So we could either leave it open and come back to it, or we can just make a motion to adjourn this until February 3rd.
Why don't we leave it open? Why don't we come back to it?
Okay.
Just to be sure.
Okay, all right. So then number 4 here is 25 Bluff Point Road. Is there somebody here to speak to this application?
Yes, Robert Anderson, Suffolk Environmental Consulting on behalf of the applicant.
Hi there.
Hi, good to see everybody again. So I believe from where we last left off, the concerns were cited as far as whether we could reduce the height of the bulkhead, which we provided plans that achieve that. which in effect also achieved lowering the amount of fill necessitated for the bulkhead reconstruction. I believe we also had concerns regarding the eastern red cedar along the southwesterly corner of the parcel. We've determined that it is outside of the area of disturbance and it will be preserved through construction activities. I believe I provided plans showing consistency across that, and I also provided the board with more details as far as how the proposed silt boom / turbidity curtain that we're going to that is proposed to be deployed prior to the construction of the dock will actually be maintained and utilized. At this point, I'm here to answer any questions as far as some of these new materials may go, or any old items that still have some concerns in your mind.
Marianne, could I just add one thing?
Yeah.
And I may speak in addition, but Rob, I think we had talked about also looking at the path that was proposed. It was very linear and making sure that vegetation was not being removed for that. How was
Yes,
that?
well, we have no proposed trees to be removed from that area, and we've also reduced the area of disturbance for that path, as we were able to determine that we could get most of this work done by water access as an alternative.
So that cedar's not coming down?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Lily gets her tree.
Beautiful tree.
Well, I think
I'm happy I'm not trying to be critical at all. I'm glad that you keep that in mind.
I think the last folks with their chopped down oak trees are a good example of what happens when you lose your trees.
So I'm curious, you're bringing, what are you bringing in by water? Because we just heard the last applicant talk about how maybe it's a matter of rock versus the kinds of materials that you're looking. What are you bringing in by water?
Probably, most likely, the piles for the proposed dock. Well, so that way we'll just store those just landward of the area of disturbance while we are doing the bulkhead construction, reconstruction. The vinyl sheathing will likely be brought in, and all timber parts as well as hardware. As I'm sure you're all very well aware, these materials will likely weigh a lot less than a rock alternative. Yes.
Okay. Chick, anybody have any questions for the applicant here?
I'll just say that we do have a full set of plans. I felt that the plans were responsive to the comments from the last meeting. You know, the big thing for me was preserving as much of the existing natural vegetation as possible.
Yeah.
So the area where there's some disturbance landward of the proposed bulkhead, which is basically replacing a non-functional bulkhead, is very limited. And everything else is shown on the plans to remain natural. And that area behind the bulkhead will be restored with native vegetation. So I felt that, you know, the height was reduced, the trees are being saved, the path is aligned properly, and I have no further questions.
Anybody else on the committee? Anybody else in the public? Is there anybody here who would like to speak to this application? Carrie, I don't see any hands, do you?
No, Marianne, I don't.
Okay, can we make a motion to close the public hearing?
I'll move.
Thank you, John. Second?
I second.
Thank you, Herb. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So then the next step we need is we need to make a motion to ask Chick to draw up a permission, a decision on this application. May I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to have Chick draw up a response to the application, I guess.
Thank you. Thank you, Will. Second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Herb. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you.
Great time.
Thank you.
Okay. And now we have a piece of new business, 88 Redwood Road. Is there anybody here to speak to the this application?
Yes, Matt Ivan, Suffolk Environmental Consulting. Just get set up, I'm sorry. here. All right, can I give you guys a little bit of background? I don't know how many board members were here when this was last before the board in 2018. So real quick, in March of 2018, we made an application to this board for the expansion of the existing dwelling on the property, which included for the construction of a swimming pool, additional decking, deck steps, a new dock to replace the old dock, and the installation of a new IA out system. While we were going through the process, this is about August of 2019, we found out that there was an issue with the groundwater. The groundwater was actually 2 feet higher than was initially determined. So we discovered that we had to redesign drastically the septic system that was proposed. By doing so, we discovered also that the existing house was beyond salvageable. So the project changed dramatically. I think we put the application on hold for the time being. Fast forward to February of 2021, the project was fleshed out. We submitted an application to this board. Can I share the screen?
Yes, please.
Hold on. Okay, let me know if you guys can see that.
Yeah.
All right, let me just zoom in just to show you what we have out there existing.
Matt, may I ask you a question? This is, I don't know if it's jumping ahead or what. It's been a long night.
That's okay.
But I went in and looked at the property today, and I couldn't see on the drawings that I have whether or not the footprint for the proposed house and deck, are they exactly the same footprint that we have out there right now at 88 Redwood?
No, it's a different house. I'll get to the next page. This is existing
Okay, all right.
conditions. But just overall, just let me tell you, right now, we pretty much replicated where we could the wetland setbacks, and we pulled back a bit where we could. So really quickly, again, I'm going to run through the numbers here because I know you guys wanted to break down a setback. So the existing dwelling, currently dwelling and garage, is about 53 feet away from the wetland. A rear deck's at 40 feet, rear deck
Right.
steps.
I saw all that, but do you have a drawing that shows the original footprint with the new footprint on top of it?
Overlaying, no, not really. We kind of try to make this a little bit easier for you guys by breaking up the survey from existing to proposed.
The overlays are usually very helpful.
They're really
Yeah.
helpful.
All right, well, let me just fast forward up to the proposed then real quick, and let me just give you an
Okay.
idea of what we're doing. All right, so this is now what we're doing. And again, we're trying to replicate the wetland setbacks. We've been successful in pushing back the house from the wetlands, putting in the swimming pool, as you can see. We have some raised planters. Obviously, you can see here, we got a pretty substantial buffer. In some in some areas, we've actually exceeded the 50-foot requirement and have approached and exceeded 60 feet in an effort to get as much buffer on the property as possible. We're getting rid of the asphalt driveway, and in lieu of that, we're putting in a gravel driveway. And as before, we're putting in an IA out system. So overall, the environmental conditions of the property are going to be improved. Right now, does the board have any questions?
Are there any of those dimensions that are less than as they exist right now?
Well, overall, if you talk about all the existing structures versus the proposed,
Yeah.
no, we're not encroaching any further to the wetlands than what's out there now. The closest structure that's out there now is the steps off the rear deck, which are 34 feet from the wetlands.
That's the dark green.
The dark, this is proposed. I'll show you the existing real quick. Hold on one second. Bear with me here. Okay, so right here,
Yeah.
the steps off the rear deck, that's 34
Okay.
feet of wetlands.
Forget those little steps. What about really substantial structures? Is there anything that's closer now than it was?
The house, all right, the existing house is at 53, the proposed house is at 50, so you got a 3-foot increase or decrease towards wetlands. The rear deck on the existing versus proposed is identical, it's 40 feet from wetlands.
So the deck is smaller by 3 feet?
I could certainly talk to the owner.
No. I'm just saying
But
that you
It's the same.
expand the house at the expense of the deck. Am I not clear? I'm sorry, it's
saying,
been a
wait,
long night. You're
No,
saying-
that-
The deck's the same, the deck's the same, the house is moving
3 feet.
towards the water by 3 feet.
So the
Right,
deck
at
is
the-
smaller.
And the
What's
deck
that?
is small.
Yeah,
yeah,
Only-
but just remember, that's a new deck though. We're not
Yeah.
keeping anything on the property.
Right.
Matt, one thing it is difficult for us to just go back and forth because the dimensions, like the 53 and the 40, those string lines, they fluctuate depending on what tangent you're on here, right? So it looks like the proposed house is rotated a little bit towards the water. I'm not sure if that's
It's-
accurate.
Yeah, no, it's done that way so it's parallel to the side yard setbacks.
Okay,
I think we're gonna need a picture of the new house and deck on top of the old footprint. And can you talk a little bit about the buffer and how it's a very small little piece of yard you have there? How you're going to manage to get enough buffer on this yard?
Well, I think we max it out. I mean, we're gonna need some room between the structures and the landward side of that buffer just for, simply going around the house or maintenance. I think we max it out on as much as we can. I mean, again, here, we're certainly not reaching the 50 foot, but again, we're stretching it out over on this side.
So what I love to see is when there's a calculation, Matt, you've probably done this, what 50 feet times the width of that property is in terms of square footage, and then how we can find that same number of square feet in a contiguous property, right? And I walked that property today, and those side yards are not a thing of beauty. It seems like, you could put some buffer going up along the property line, and it would probably be very nice.
Yeah, I did some rudimentary calculations. I believe it or not, I think I'm about 168 to 200 feet off of extra buffer to achieve that. So I'll talk to the owner about that.
Yeah, because how deep is this house? I mean, if you just ran like, native plantings up along the side of the property lines, you'd get there really quickly.
Yeah.
160 feet is not much.
All right, that's a thought. That's a good thought. All right, so let me just figure out. All right, so you guys want basically an overlay showing existing and proposed, but kind of simplify it. So, because otherwise, if I have the surveyor do it, you're gonna need therapy from trying to figure it out. So
Sure, you can work it out.
Yeah, so we can provide you with like a simple overlay, okay, to give you an idea. And in the meantime,
Yeah, we need the picture. We need like, the new thing, and you just need to like put like, the red outline of the porch and a blue outline of what the existing house is on top of that. Is that hard to do? I don't think that's hard to do.
No, we most likely, we can do that actually.
Yeah, you don't need a surveyor, I think.
All right.
And did you get the IA system in? How's that looking?
It's not in yet. No, we're pending review. They just need to sign off from you guys before they issue the permit.
Right. I don't mean
It's
physically,
proposed.
but you've got it located in the front yard.
That's part of the proposal, yeah.
Right, and your gravel driveway, that's pervious, right? It doesn't have a tar base?
Nope, it's definitely pervious.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
what system is the IA that you're using, Matt? You know?
Hold on one sec. Well, you ask always the good questions, don't you?
Well, it's educational for us because we were led to believe in the past that you couldn't put an IA system in a driveway. And here you have it.
No, we've been successful. I mean, it basically comes down to doing a covenant with the health department and giving them $900.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'll get you that information on the type.
Okay, well, much appreciated.
It's in the other room. I don't want to
It looks like your numbers are good if I toggle back and forth. So like Mary Ann said, you don't need to survey, you just get your architect to do. And it's pretty quick.
Yeah, tracing paper would do it.
No, I
Okay.
hear ya.
Any other questions for Matt? Did you look at the planting plan as it exists now, Chick? What did you think?
Yeah, I actually have some other comments whenever you're ready.
Okay, go, yes.
Well, I mean, it's kind of been a party so far, and I really hate to be a party pooper.
Oh.
I have to, sorry, Matt. I have to at least, let the board know of, some of the recent reviews that we've done. And, this is a case where, and I will refer to my memo finding this to be complete for the hearing dated December 3rd, 2021.
Okay.
Preliminary comments number 5. I'll just read it. It says the proposed activities do not comply with wetland setbacks required under 285-9A and 285-9E. It is recommended that an alternate design and layout be considered in order to maximize setbacks from the wetlands. Maximization of setbacks to meet the 75-foot structure setback and/or minimization of the encroachment into the 75-foot setback is recommended. And there was alternative analysis by the applicant, but, I just go back to 12 Green Street, 36 Fordham, and the committee has looked very carefully at these, especially where a house is being completely removed and then being rebuilt. And you've looked to try and achieve greater conformity, not just, observing the current setbacks. And I'm just putting that out for informational purposes because that's how we've been looking at a number of applications lately.
You're right.
Well, just in response to your direct question, Mary Ann, I did note that there's a 4725 square foot variable with non-fertilized, non-disturbance buffer. I did suggest that greater proposed species diversity, particularly for shrubs and grasses, is recommended. And that's item number 3 in the preliminary comments from the December 3rd memo. And I forget, oh yeah, and then you asked the question that I would have, and that is what is the quantity if it were to be a 50-foot buffer and are meeting that, because that's also been something that we've looked for on prior applications. So that was the end of my comments.
Well, those are big comments. So you're right. Is there a basement here?
Yeah, it'll be a crawl space.
Is there an existing basement?
That I don't believe so at this time.
Did I hear you say, Chick, that there'd been some drawings that would comply with the 75-foot setback?
I don't know if it went that far, and I'll let Matt present whatever he thinks would help to address that portion of chapter 285. But, certainly reconfiguration, smaller porch, pool. We've talked about that on other applications. When I look at the plan, there's a number of things that could be done to maximize the setbacks and at least come closer to the 75. And I don't think anything in that level of detail, but I'll let Matt present his case as far as, meeting the requirements of chapter 285.
The pool's at 76, if I read that right,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
Yes, but would could the house be reconfigured into that to maximize the setback of the house? I think.
Yeah, just understand that the existing house is actually less square footage. Is more than what we're proposing. It does include the garage, the existing garage, but I think what we're doing here is actually downsizing the house. On the report, it does say, I'm not sure, Chick, on the report, the second paragraph under introduction, it does quote a 977 square foot dwelling, a shed, and the remains of a shed. So I'm not sure if that's, I don't think that's our project. But we are decreasing the size of the house. I mean, we really can't go much further towards the street due to setbacks into the sanitary system. Again, we're trying to replicate the wetland setbacks that exist today. We're trying to pull back where we can.
Yeah, but you know what? Chick is absolutely right. And I think that there's like a level of exhaustion tonight. And I apologize for that. But we really need to look at trying to get these setbacks to the 75 feet. The fact that you're taking this house totally down, it's sort of like, you know, then we're starting with a blank slate. You got the pool.
Are you tearing the foundation out, Matt?
Everything's coming out.
Okay.
Yeah. If I can ask you a question here, I'm looking at an aerial picture of the current house and I'm looking at your plan. And the houses are oriented differently. Your current plan has the house, the side wall of the house parallel to the property line.
Yep.
And the existing house, rather than being sort of parallel to the property line, is parallel to the shoreline.
That's correct.
So it's at an angle. And my thought is that if the new proposed house had the same orientation as the old house, you would actually have a greater setback.
You're right.
In other words, by turning it, if you can visualize, by turning it clockwise,
right.
Here, that corner, which is closest to the wetlands, would be pulled back some. And I'm wondering if simply by, or at least as part of a revision, if you change that orientation so that it's similar to the old house, whether we would get an increased setback.
We can explore that, but I can tell you, I mean, you're gonna suddenly find yourself with some zoning nonconformities, which we've been trying to avoid.
Well, we've got one right now. And we
No,
need a 75
I
foot.
understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, my comment.
I know that, I don't know if you have a sanitary engineer. We have had sanitary engineers testify before, but is there a possibility to reorient the septic tank, the treatment tank, and look to try and, you know, bring that structure farther south?
There's a possibility for that. I'd have to talk to the engineer, Joe Fischetti, on that.
How far is the house off the road now? 30 feet on that one corner?
Yeah.
What do you mean, the existing?
No, the proposed.
Oh, proposed is
The
30.
existing is 30. What's the proposed?
Yeah.
No.
Yep, it's replicating that.
And that's the minimum setback?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in combination with what John said.
Yes.
Before.
Yeah, right. Yeah, rotating it a bit.
Yeah, Matt, you could probably just tweak that, like, I mean, easier said than done.
That's the problem. I mean, the problem is how far, you know, I mean, I could tweak it a couple feet. I just don't know. You know, I got to satisfy you guys and also satisfy the owner. I mean, let me look at it. Let me explore it a little bit without, you know, we could go around and around for the next half hour on this.
Right.
But let me talk to Joe. Yeah,
Put your thinking cap on. And the other thing I think that could make all our lives easier is rather than having a wood deck, you have a pervious deck there.
Impervious, how do you mean by that? Just slatted with the gaps in between?
Well, I don't know about that. I was thinking about some kind of pervious pavers or something. Chick, what can we do there so that it doesn't count as a hard structure?
Yeah, that's Matt, but certainly some type of pervious paver could work. I mean, a deck itself, depending on the, you know, board width and openings.
Right.
It is a structure. That's the problem. It's defined as a structure under the code. And we've looked at that very carefully on other projects as well.
Well, but what about, like, you know, when we have boat docks and we have walkways that are going over and we have, like, you know, the I forget the name of it.
It's roof line.
Flow decking.
Yeah.
That could be. Again, I would just direct Matt to the code for looking at the the structure setback as defined in chapter 285, and then what was a structure under the zoning code. And that's really kind of what we're faced with. And he can creatively look at something that may not be defined as a structure that would, allow for a maximization of that setback.
So
Can I add,
if you cantilever it from the house, does it still count?
It's really a building department thing. I don't know if Fred knows better or will even.
Yeah, I have,
If it's attached to the dwelling, I think it becomes a deck structure that's subject to a CO and everything else.
yeah.
Go ahead,
and may I
Fred.
ask a question? What difference does it make? I mean, the wood obviously would have slats, so the water would drain through it, but it's covered.
Yeah, you're right.
So there's
That
no
is
difference
covered, yeah.
between, in my opinion, the purview,
Right.
It
I think
really
it
does
would-
make a difference, Lily, you're right.
yeah.
But I think it's just really having Matt look at the code and figure out how to, create the maximized buffer setback, I should say.
Right.
Yeah, I think there's some possibilities here that, again, it may not meet the exact footage because of problems with having to have room for the septic system, et cetera. But if we could have a little bit more, a little increase in the buffer, or significant increase in the buffer by a little bit of a redesign here, I think that would be more acceptable.
Well, it's not, I don't know what you mean by the buffer. I mean, the planted buffer is one thing, but
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
setback is what I'm really,
Setback,
setback, increase in the setback.
Matt, we need our setbacks. And I think, you're a creative guy. I think you can do something here. So everybody
All right,
walks
let me-
away happy.
Okay. All right, I'm going to talk to the owner. I'll talk to Joe Fischetti, the engineer.
Okay, thank
And
you.
we'll explore it.
Yeah,
All right.
especially with the deck. I mean, just taking a corner off that deck would give you 10 more feet.
I see.
All right. There was a letter from a neighbor. Is that something we want to discuss here? I didn't see the letter.
I saw the neighbor was on earlier. I haven't looked recently. But yes, we did get it.
Thanks up.
I'm the neighbor. Hi.
Hi.
But you need to open the public hearing. You haven't done that yet.
Oh. Can I have a motion to open the public hearing?
I'll move.
Thank you. Second,
So,
all in favor? Aye.
all right.
All right. Carrie, wrap our fingers earlier. Okay, is there somebody from the public who would like to address this application?
Hi, I'm Jennifer Mazel. I live at 84. I'm at 84 Redwood. I own it with my sister Miriam, who was on earlier, but she's overseas, so it's like 4:00 in the morning where she is. So
Okay.
yeah, you're left with me. I think my questions. I just had two questions. One was about the setback, so I think that was covered pretty well by all of you. And the other just question I have, which may not be appropriate at this point, I haven't been privy to any of these before. It's just that I just wanted to be clear that like where the property line is and that the trees are on that border between the two of us are on our side of the property line. And I just want to make sure that there's no intention to take those down, either because those are our only privacy between the two houses.
Are you talking about those big, large conifers?
Yes. Because right now it looks like, if I understand it correctly, and I'm not very good with plans, that garage that you're turning into more people space, because it'll be part of the house, is, it brings people like closer to our side. So I just want to make sure that's respected. I've had trouble before with people like just taking down the trees and then saying, "Oh, oops."
If it's not on our property, no, we're not going to touch it.
Okay, thank you.
Rope them off and mark them anyway.
It's a good idea to mark them. Also, I'd like to ask the neighbor, is your house non-conforming also?
Our house was built in 1970. 78 by my phone.
So it's like this one. It's a pre-existing non-conforming structure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Mark those trees.
What?
I would mark those trees.
What are you
I'm sorry,
talking about, Lily?
When you say mark them, what does that mean?
Well, couldn't you put like some sort of tape on them and put your last name on them?
I don't know. If somebody wants to cut them down, they'll just cut them down. But I think, do they need to be on, I don't know, on a survey? What do they need to be?
I mean, they are on our side of the property line. I'm sorry, I've had issues in where I live, where my other home is in Los Angeles, where people have, just chopped the tree and then, gone in for trouble later.
Right.
So I just wanted to express it. I didn't know who I was expressing it to at this meeting before. I haven't, the Zoom opportunity is that I can actually attend these meetings. Because
What's really helpful is to walk the property line with your neighbor, so that you both are real clear about that. So you do the neighborly thing, and then you can mark your trees, and you might discover that some trees are yours and some trees are not yours. But if you walk the property line, the elevation 9.6 in the lower right-hand corner should have a flag, or it might have a concrete monument, something to that effect.
I'm happy to do it next time I'm out there. I don't actually know who owns that property because it's under an LLC, so I wouldn't even know how to.
Hey, Jennifer, I'm sorry to butt in. Do you want to give me your phone number or email address?
Sure. My email address is Jennifer Maisel, JENNIFER MAISEL @gmail.com.
Okay, great. All right, I'll shoot you an email either tonight or tomorrow. Okay?
That's great. Thank you.
You got it.
Okay. Any other questions? Anybody else from the audience, from the public? Okay. Can I have a motion, please, to adjourn this application until February 3rd?
I'll make a motion.
Or I'll
Thank
second.
you. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
All right, board, have a good night.
Thank you.
Hey, Matt.
Take care.
Well,
Thanks
thank
for the
you.
couch.
Thanks.
Inside joke.
Mary Ann, I'm going to have to excuse myself as well. So unless there's any need, I don't think you need me for a quorum or for anything like
Well,
that.
so this, not for a quorum, but I did want to suggest that we go into executive session and have Fred brief us on this Article 78 suit.
We still have to go back to 40 Redwood because we didn't do 40 Redwood.
Is there anybody here to speak to 40 Redwood?
This is Gerald Schwenk. I'm the applicant. Anyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. So after the application was adjourned last month, I worked with First Coastal. I've been working with them all along, actually. And we came up with a new buffer plan,
Okay.
which I thought would be presented at tonight's meeting. So I don't really understand why Billy's not here, Billy or his partner. A little disappointed about that.
Chick, have you received anything? I didn't have anything in my packet.
Yes, I can, just give me 1 second and I'll get to that file. We received additional information on December 21st. And I had gone back and forth with Billy a couple of times just to make sure that the gravel area was not part of what was being shown as the buffer. If you can see this, I'll explain it if that would be helpful.
Please.
Okay, so here you have the revised plan. What they did first was determine this is the new bulkhead area.
Right.
They came back 50 feet from that and determined that that was an area of 5,200 square feet.
Okay.
Then you will certainly recall, and I can pull up an aerial, but I think we all know the site very well. There's an area of existing natural vegetation just to the west of the new bulkhead.
Right.
And there's an area that was voluntarily established, native vegetation along the marina bulkhead.
Right,
And I think that's to the credit of the applicant. And at the last meeting, the committee said, yeah, we'll give you credit for that.
right.
3,040 square feet. And then Billy was tasked at the last meeting with coming up with the remainder to make sure that we're at or above the 5,200 square feet.
Okay,
This area, well, first, this area was gravel. That's not included in the buffer calculations.
okay,
But
good.
there's a boat ramp here. I think operationally, and I'm sure the applicant can comment on this as well. Gerald, I think it is. Operationally, they needed a little more room here. That's fine, I think. It's pervious. It's a gravel area, and it will help the boat ramp. And we like to encourage water-dependent uses and water access.
Right.
Then this area is a proposed planted red fescue buffer. I think that was just because kind of made sense next to an active area. It can be delineated. It certainly doesn't require fertilization. We have approved that in some cases in the past for natural buffer. And then they added a planting area. It's 8 feet wide and it's switchgrass. And that was one of my suggestions. And we did send them right after the last meeting. I sent the Cove Road rain garden plan so that Billy had that. And so that was this additional 8 feet. Then if you look at the red over here,
yep,
got existing buffer of 3,475 square feet.
Right.
Proposed buffer of 2,070 square feet, and the cumulative buffer as shown, as I just described,
Wow.
5,545 square feet. So
Well
that's
done.
5,200.
Bingo. Okay. Does anybody on the committee have a question about the math or the design or the intent of this application?
But Chick, I just wanted to ask, I'm not sure that we're aware of the new planting plan for the Cove for the Cove Park. Does this match up with that? We had talked about having, hopefully that the buffer on this side would match up with what's going to be in the Cove Park.
Yeah, I think that was one of the benefits of putting the buffer on the west. We had talked about, should it be next to the pervious gravel parking? That didn't make a lot of sense, but putting it near the property line, does complement the rain garden design for Cove Road.
Right. Okay, I think we have a good solution. Does anybody else have a comment here? Does the applicant have any comment, questions?
No, other than the fact that I'm not sure if the board is aware that this work can only be done in winter, so as not to disrupt the business.
Right.
Originally, we had hoped to do it over the winter of 2021. That didn't happen. And so I'm really hoping it's possible to do it this winter. If it's adjourned again, my contractor will have other work lined up, and there's a good chance it won't happen this winter either. So,
Well, unless there's somebody on the committee who has like some hesitation, I think we are ready to ask our consultant to draw up a decision. Is there
It's
anybody?
up to you. It's totally up to you, Mary Ann, but I can do you one better if we
Do
want,
that.
if we want to accommodate.
Yes, let's accommodate.
I had prepared a permit for this.
Oh. Way to go,
Okay.
Chick.
And I
Well
thought,
done.
and I think it was Lely before that thought the same thing. I thought that was the directive, was just to work this out with Billy between meetings and be ready.
All right, let's go with that.
I like to be proactive and do the best I can to keep things moving.
Okay, so can you
All right.
read your decision? You
Sure,
haven't-
it's pretty simple. It was emailed.
First of all,
It was
did we
emailed
close
on
the hearing?
Tuesday.
Did we
No,
close
I
the
was
hearing?
just going to intervene. You need to close
Okay.
the public
All right.
hearing.
Can I have a motion to close the public hearing?
I make that motion.
Thank you. Second, please.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Close the public.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so now we need a motion. What do we want?
I could, well, I just heard recording is stuff.
Right.
There we go.
So
I was just going to go through and brief you on the draft permit. This was emailed on Tuesday. It does have the most recent plan that I just presented.
Okay.
In it talks about, the project description, background on the project, the zoning, the, various designations, and basically our findings. And, again, we know this property very well. It's a marina. And we do want to promote water access. So the conditions are basically having it conform to the plan that First Coastal presented. The conditions include the buffer that I just talked about, and really nothing unusual here other than that we do have the performance for survival, as well as a covenant for the areas as they're shown on the plan. And the plan is referenced on page 5. So that's the draft permit before you, if you wish to proceed.
Yeah, I'd like to proceed. But can I have a motion? Is there any discussion or question about this decision that Chick has written?
No.
No. Can I have a motion to accept this decision as written?
I'll make that.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, go hire your contractor.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing.
Thank you.
Oh,
Gerald, please tell Billy he owes me one.
yeah, we like Billy. We don't want to get Billy in trouble.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, so, Fred, I think, how should we do this? There's a couple of little itty bitty things. It's very late. I know that Herb would like to go. I would like you to describe our Article 78. Can we go into
Hold
executive?
on, hold on. We're on live YouTube and other people are in the meeting. You can't just start talking.
Yeah, we would
about
have
the
to.
executive.
We'd have to adjourn, right?
Well, we would have to make a motion to go into executive session first. Typically, we usually do another Zoom link to do this.
Yeah, you can't just start having an executive session in this Zoom.
Okay,
So I don't know if you should make another meeting, or do you want me to do another Zoom link for now? But you can't do that. You can't do that now. So you should make a motion to adjourn the meeting
Well,
now.
Carrie, can you get us another Zoom link that we
Yes.
can all get on and do this?
Yep.
Right, for now, that is.
All right, so make a motion to adjourn.
I'll create the Zoom.
okay.
All right, thank you, Heather.
May I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
I'll move.
Thank you. Second, great. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, and we should just do a motion to go into executive session and go to the other Zoom
Okay,
to discuss
Okay.
litigation.
right. May I have a motion to go into executive session to discuss litigation?
I'll move to go into executive session, discuss
Thank you.
litigation.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right. See you back here shortly.
As a question, are we going to be emailed the link? How are we going to know?
Yes, right now. Heather's doing it right now. She just has to set the meeting up.